Thank you all very much for joining us today. I'm Matt Abbott. I'm the Deputy Director of ICNN and C4CJ. And my colleague here is John Barron, who runs West Leeds Dispatch and is also the Engagements Manager for our Ping project, along with our digital partner, our tech partner, Omni Digital. And John's been doing some terrific work with us over the past 12 months and has helped me bring this conference together for you all today. So it's great to see so many of you here today. We originally planned this for spring 2020, as everybody knows, but we had to cancel at the last minute. Anyway, we're delighted to be back. Even if we are just online this year, we've got a terrific range of inspiring speakers lined up to talk about their success stories and to take us on a deep dive into the current state of community journalism in the UK. Before I talk about these fantastic speakers, though, I would just like to recap exactly where we are and the state of the sector today. C4CJ at Cardiff University, we launched the Independent Community News Network, ICNN, back in 2018. And since then, our membership has grown and grown. We're now proud to represent over 125 independent titles across the UK. The combined reach of the membership is over 22 million page views per month, with a monthly print run of over 300,000. Journalism Matters Week, a campaign supported by the Queen, highlighted the excellent work being done by the sector, and many independent editors and journalists were nominated for the Public Interest News List. The sector can no longer be viewed as peripheral. It is now an essential and extremely valuable part of the news ecosystem. Members of ICNN are independent of commercial, political, and religious interests. They are community focused, producing contemporaneous news content, upholding high professional standards of accuracy, transparency, integrity, accountability, and fairness. They are committed to the Editor's Code of Practice, the Impress Standards Code, and the NUJ Code of Conduct, and all demonstrate a clear and transparent management and ownership structure. While the majority of our titles are geographically hyperlocal, other members represent communities of interest, such as the Ferret or Hold the Front Page. Nearly half members have complementary print newspapers or publish a weekly, fortnightly, or monthly newspaper exclusively. They range in business structure from blogs through membership programs, cooperatives, micropayment sites, traditional newspapers, social enterprises, community interest companies. And together, they play a huge role in local democracy. In many areas, bear with me one moment, let me switch Dominic. Hi, Dominic, I'm just going to switch you over to an attendee role. Bear with me one moment so we can carry on. Thank you, sorry about that. Together, these outlets play a huge role in local democracy. In many areas, they're the only journalists attending local council meetings, local planning meetings, schools, elections, magistrate court hearings, and holding those in power to account. There are areas where if these hyperlocals and independents ceased to exist, town and city leaders would operate unchecked. Now, at a time when we could be forgiven for thinking that this dedication might falter, when things got quite difficult for members, that very hard discussions were taking place about whether individually they could weather the storm. What we saw instead was members celebrating record levels of traffic, producing tens of thousands of articles on coronavirus for their communities, holding power to account, collaborating on national investigations, celebrating excellence in their communities, and mourning with those who lost friends and family. ICNN only lost 2 members during the pandemic, one which could no longer remain in operation due to lack of government support. They actually cited that as the main reason, and the other whose editor was coaxed away by Reach. However, the first is making a comeback via a crowdsourcing venture, and the other is currently going through an application process to rejoin ICNN. In short, members of ICNN have gone above and beyond their roles as community news organisations, and not just the members of ICNN, the independent sector in total, and all with very little government support. Over the last few years that we've been representing the sector, we've seen a huge increase in professionalism and visibility and reputation. Membership of ICNN is now used as a kite mark by governments, BBC, charities, third-party organisations, and social media platforms. We've worked on a number of funding programmes in the millions focused on supporting the sector. We've raised the profile of community news by working with Google to bring the first ever community news category to a journalism award ceremony. We've trained over 3,000 people around the country in journalism techniques and helped resolve hundreds of legal issues for members, helping them save potentially hundreds of thousands in legal costs. We've secured a number of industry discounts for members, including membership to the Society of Editors and accessibility tools for online sites. And we've issued membership cards that acted as a verification tool during the darkest days of lockdown. And we've spent the last few years investing time and money to develop a suite of tools called Ping that will help deliver a revenue, much needed revenue for community news publishers. And we're also working on an exciting new project with a core group of members to explore the possibility of collective advertising. There are certainly exciting times ahead for independent community news. Yes, a lot of the same issues remain: sustainability, recognition. We still get referred to as bedroom bloggers and citizen journalists, God forbid, by some people. But things have moved on and times have changed. COVID brought about a seismic shift in the way that journalism and its practitioners are viewed. And we at ICNN believe it's our responsibility and our opportunity to live up to that. I'd just like to congratulate Kathy Bales from the Isle of Thanet News on winning the overall award in the Kent Press and Broadcast Awards news last week. The judges said of the Isle of Thanet that it was revelatory during the pandemic, and they really pulled it out of the bag and did a great job for the local community. So congratulations to Kathy and the Isle of Thanet. So I really hope you enjoyed today's conference and tomorrow's. Please feel free to stay all day or dip in and out. We understand it can be a long day in front of a screen, which is why we've kept it relatively short for both days. I'd just like to go over a couple of housekeeping points before I hand over to John. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your window. We will endeavour to answer your question at the end of any panel talk. You can submit these during the talks if you want to, or you can ask them at the end. We factored in some time for questions. Please use the hashtag, hashtag CJBSF21, that's Community Journalism, Building a Sustainable Future 21, on social media, so people attending on Twitter and Facebook can follow the conversation. I'll add that into the chat box in a moment. The conference is being recorded. Hope that's okay with everyone. A version of it will be made available within a few days at the end of the conference if you need to refer back to it. And at the end of the day and at the end of tomorrow, we are going to move to a Google chat where we can hope to have a free-flowing chat with whoever wishes to stay behind and do a bit of e-networking. And finally, at the end of the conference, there is a small survey. If you could just please spend 1 minute of your time filling it out, as it really helps us with our research requirements and our sponsorship. And I'll now hand over to John. I'm going to embarrass a little bit right now by saying it's been an absolute pleasure working with John for the last 12 months. I don't think we could have got through it without him. Long may it continue, John. John will now introduce our first speaker.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just for all our discussions today, you'll see at the bottom of your screen that there is a Q&A kind of option where you can start to ask questions. So we'll be taking questions for all the different participants at the end of each talk. So if you have any questions that kind of strike you as people are talking, don't hesitate to kind of use that functionality, and we'll go through them at the end. Really great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Professor Karin Wall-Jorgensen. Karin's a professor at the School of Journalism, Media and Culture at Cardiff University. She's spoken in depth with many of you, I think, in the past 18 months or so about your experiences and challenges you've faced during the pandemic. She's also run a survey with community news practitioners, which some of you will have undoubtedly completed. Karin today is going to talk about her findings, and I'll hand over to her so she can introduce herself properly. Karin.
Thank you very much, John, and also thanks to Matt for the introduction. And it's really great to hear about all the work that's being done in C4CJ and ICNN. And I also want to extend my congratulations to Kathy, who makes an appearance in this presentation today. And I want to, before I begin, just to express my huge gratitude for the willingness of so many of you to participate in this research, because this research is not only important for academic purposes, but it's actually also been really important in terms of giving us some evidence that we can use to lobby governments and other organizations to actually secure funding for the sector. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Right. So, so what I'm going to be talking about today specifically is about the experiences of community journalism practitioners, of you, in the coronavirus pandemic. Now, if you're attending this conference, chances are that you strongly believe in the importance of community news and its importance to local communities. And for me as an academic, I'm interested in community news because I see it as being essential to a democratic society, and I'm not alone in this. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of the kind of scholarly debates around local and community journalism, scholars have for a long time found that the decline of the local journalism industry has had serious consequences for the health of these local communities. So local community newspaper or local newspapers now tend to publish less political news. This is also something that Matt mentioned. The closure of local newspapers tend to be closely correlated with a decline in electoral participation and accountability in local politics. So we see that the problems in the local journalism industry has had a dramatic impact on local civic life. But at the same time, local news continues to be highly trusted. So 75% of those surveyed in a YouGov poll trust local newspapers online or in print. And 66% of people appreciate and value journalism more since the global coronavirus pandemic began. So as you're all aware, you as community journalism practitioners have come to the rescue by stepping into the gap, in many cases, left by traditional local newspapers, and therefore doing really essential work to address the democratic deficit. Matt has already mentioned this point, but even though most community journalism outlets tend to be quite small in terms of their geographic and populations reach, collectively you reach very significant portions of the population. So one figure that I've seen bandied about is 14.9 million in the UK. And Matt has shared some other information about the quite staggering reach and significance of the sector. But at the same time, as we'll all be quite painfully aware, it also remains a relatively financially precarious sector with fairly limited resources. So many of the community journalism outlets in the UK and beyond tend to operate as one-man or one-woman shops, often powered by volunteers or people who have otherwise made really quite major material sacrifices to make it possible to publish community journalism. So in that sense, there's agreement amongst scholars that actually, if we look at community journalism as a sector, its existence continually needs to be defended. So it's against the backdrop of that body of scholarship, so what we already know about journalism, community journalism, that we carried out our research. So with my colleagues, Julia Bülle, whom you'll hear from later today, and Iñaki Garcia Blanco, we did 57 in-depth interviews from the 123 members of the Independent Community News Network. And then in addition to that, we carried out a survey of 116 community journalists this year, so in March and April 2021. I've put in here that we had a response rate of 53% for the survey, and equally you can see that we had close to half of all the members of ICNN participating in our interviews. When I speak to other social scientists about this, they are just astounded at what we call a response rate, the response rate. So in other words, we've been very privileged that you have all been willing to speak to us and share your experiences. So the interviews and the surveys covered broader kind of elements of your practice and the kinds of challenges you face. But for the purposes of today's talk, Matt thought it would be most helpful that I focused specifically on talking about your experiences in the pandemic. Just to foreground the findings, I want to put across the point that the pandemic represented severe financial and logistical challenges to community news outlets, sometimes causing an existential threat. At the same time, what we also saw and what somewhat surprised us was that some outlets actually benefited from the pandemic, in some cases through increased funding opportunities, and in other cases in terms of increased audience engagement and recognitions of the importance of the work that you're doing. Across the board, what we saw was a widespread understanding of the importance of local and community journalism organized around the idea of actually making a difference in the local community. So I want to go through then some of the key areas that really stood out in terms of your experiences. And the first thing that I want to talk about is how you work to adapt your publications and your distribution during the pandemic. So first and perhaps most dramatically, the first lockdown caused an immediate collapse of local advertising revenue. And in that respect, those who produce a print edition, which is 40.2% of outlets according to our survey, were particularly affected. This was due to a combination of different factors. In some cases, printers closed down shop. Across the board, there was a closure of the key kinds of sites for distributing free copies, places like shops, cafes, and council sites. And for those outlets or publications that actually deliver the papers, there were safety concerns about the delivery. So 62% of outlets with print editions actually completely stopped publishing, at least for some period of time during the pandemic. Now, a few really well-established community news operators who could benefit from government furlough schemes, in several cases chose to furlough their staff, but that was just 13.8% of respondents to our survey. So a large number of community news journalists talked about the challenges of not actually having adequate government support to weather the sorry, I just dropped my laptop to weather the financial consequences of the pandemic. In one particularly heartbreaking case, which is one that I wanted to mention because John is one of the organizers of this conference. So John Barron from the West Leeds Dispatch actually had to abandon the first ever print edition of the Dispatch, which is something that he had spent months working on, relying quite heavily on contributions from community volunteers who had been trained to report on what was going on locally by John and his team. And the paper was actually completely ready to go to print when the lockdown happened. John eventually received a grant from the European Journalism Fund to help him get the print edition back on track. But for those that continued to print, they had to come up with kind of creative solutions for how to distribute the paper. So Phil Creighton from the Wokingham paper created a new distribution network through food bank deliveries, garden centers, and a very kind Indian takeaway that offered to distribute copies of the Wokingham paper with people's takeaway curries. In the case of South Leeds Life, Jeremy Morton was lucky enough to get a local vicar to volunteer to distribute the paper on his daily rounds. And the Valleys of the Wells Voice printed a council-sponsored special issue for the pandemic with a focus on local services and businesses as a way of actually getting a paper out. And meanwhile, Alan McIntosh of the Broughton Spurtle took an enterprising approach with his team, where team members printed copies of the paper off at home and then got agreement to post them in the windows of local news agents and also on council building notice boards. However, there were major financial challenges to the sector as a whole. So according to our survey, 12.5% of respondents believed that they may be forced to actually permanently shut down their outlets. Now, this number is actually smaller than what was predicted at the outset of the pandemic, where a public interest news foundation and ICNN survey in March 2020 showed that 3/4 of all editors reported the pandemic as a potential existential threat, and 94% thought the pandemic would have adverse financial consequences for their organization. But it still really vividly highlights the precarious finances of the sector. And in our survey, we asked those who believed that they may have to shut down why that was the case. And so I've put some of the reasons that people shared up here on the slide. And what you can see is that some respondents cited reasons for closure that were unrelated to the pandemic, but for others, the threat to operations was clearly linked to it. And this is something that should be viewed in the light of information about the financial circumstances of community news outlets, as shown in our survey. So just over 2 in 5, or 41%, reported an income over £1,000 a month. This is a kind of improvement in the financial state, because in a comparable survey that was carried out, where the same question was asked in 2013 to 2014, just 24.1% suggested that they make over £1,000 a month. So there's some evidence to suggest that the sector is increasingly professionalized, with more than a quarter reporting an income over £2,000 a month. At the same time, almost a third of all of you work 40 or more hours on the publications each week. So you can see that increasingly there's evidence that that community journalists work essentially full-time on their publications, even if you do not get paid full-time wages, or at least full-time living wages for that work. So how did community journalists actually survive the pandemic? Well, some survived by temporarily switching to other forms of employment or income. So Joe Willis of Richmondshire today, who I believe actually won an award, or a business award in Richmondshire, was indeed very enterprising. So he started up several new businesses and activities, including a local dating site and a county-wide news site, and also did deliveries for local gin distillery on the side. Mark McGinley from Peckham Peculiar, who also manages 2 other local newspapers in the area, stopped publishing print papers over the course of the pandemic for a few months, and instead took on freelance editing work while the print publications were on pause. However, it wasn't all doom and gloom. So some organizations actually saw their fortunes improve as a result of the pandemic. More than half of you saw an increase in audience figures, which is something that really highlighted the importance of community news at a time of crisis. And a substantial minority reported actually having improved finances, largely from getting grant funding when local authorities and also various charitable organizations recognize the importance of community news. And one thing to note here, and this is a point that we frequently make when we talk about this, particularly to governments and other people who might have money to give to community news outlets, is that the relatively small size of operations means that getting a grant actually can make a really significant difference to their sustainability. So for example, Kathy Bales from the Isle of Thanet News, the award-winning Isle of Thanet News, actually had her first weekend off since she launched the site in 2017. She managed to get her first weekend off because she received a council grant to support businesses affected by the coronavirus pandemic. And that enabled her to hire a former colleague to cover the local community and create content for her news site, so she could step away at least for a weekend. But For everyone involved, the pandemic represented a really challenging moment, not just for operations, but also for reporting and for ways of working. So James Cracknell, who was at that time working at the Waltham Forest Echo, but is now editor-in-chief at Social Spider Community News and editor of Enfield Dispatch, talked about this in, I think, quite emotional terms, which in a way, and also in a way that reflected, I think, the experiences of many of you. So he said, I was born in 1985, so it's the biggest major world event that's happened in my lifetime. To be reporting on it at the local level means that at the very beginning, I realized that my job was to literally give our readers information that could save their lives. I was like, bloody hell, that's quite a responsibility, because you had people stuck in their homes, people who were literally unable to open their front door, but they needed that prescription picked up, they needed their food, and they needed someone to look out for them. Literally overnight, you had thousands of people in the community who needed help. So I saw the job of us as a local newspaper to give them the information they needed so they could get the help they needed. So the front pages that we did right at the beginning were unlike any journalism I've ever done before. Those stories we were writing in the beginning were about how can I give people the information they need that could save their lives. Now, one key challenge was to actually cover the news given the restrictions on movement and social interaction imposed by the lockdown. A number of interviewees had actually for a very long time relied on news gathering via social media, web, and teleconferencing. And so for those respondents and interviewees, the pandemic resulted in relatively little change in their daily work routines beyond an increase in the amount of work. So that's something reflected here by Jonathan Shepard from dside.com, who talked about how using Zoom and Skype has been part of the norm for the last few years. So all COVID-19 has done is just create a lot more work. But for many others of you, being on the ground in the local community is a value in itself. And indeed, many interviewees were using that daily exercise to walk the beat, to walk around the communities and see what was happening on the ground. Many of you were taking photos as well to kind of really document the dramatic changes in the landscapes of towns and cities. So Colm OHara from Newry.ie is a community journalism editor who has a professional background as a photographer. And he talked about how he was documenting the changes in the landscape. He said, I documented things like COVID-19 testing stations and signs on shops relating to why they're closed, screens being put up, trafficless roads, the layout of queues going into stores, the Archbishop saying Easter Sunday Mass and blessing an empty crowd. And the worrying thing about all of that is that you start thinking, maybe this actually is normal. Have I enough photographs taken in the supermarket before the screens, or don't I? Now, most editors at the same time tended to adapt their work to the digital environment. And that's something we've indeed found across all sectors of work, including the broader journalism landscape. And so you tended to turn to phone, Zoom, and Skype, as well as social media and online resources for information gathering, even if many of you reported missing daily interactions in the community. Now, in terms of how coverage changed and what was important for you as priorities and news values during the pandemic, the majority of our interviewees stressed the importance of providing reliable and trustworthy information in the face of widespread fake news and conspiracies about COVID-19 circulating on social media, including in local contexts. Many of you were proud of sharing accurate information about things like the number of local coronavirus cases and deaths, particularly at the earliest period of the pandemic when that information wasn't as widely available. Something that was being done quite carefully also to avoid sensationalism. So some of you experimented with new news formats. So, for example, we've got we've got York Mix putting on a live blog around what was going on in relation to the pandemic. Equally, many of you stress the importance of publishing hard news stories and actually holding authorities to account throughout the pandemic. And I've put some examples up here. For example, Hans Marta from Shetland News talked about being able to get a scoop by actually getting the story of the first coronavirus cases on Shetland. And likewise, Jonathan Shepard from dside.com felt it was quite important for community journalism sites, so Wrexham.com and dside.com working closely together to be able to ask questions in the Welsh First Minister's briefings around the pandemic. And Kathy Bales, making an appearance again, talked about how she published stories covering outbreaks in local nursing homes, despite the fact that these nursing homes were very resistant and very much against having these stories come out. The survey documented very significant changes in the news agenda during the pandemic, with an understandable decline in reporting on local events because nothing really was happening locally, and more of a focus on the pandemic itself, as well as kind of positive initiatives going on in the pandemic. So there was a kind of change in journalistic style in some cases, where there was an emphasis on stories about positive initiatives that might enhance community cohesion. So the majority of survey respondents actually suggested that that your role hasn't really changed since the start of the pandemic, but the pandemic really brought out the importance of community journalists as local advocates, promoters, and also, in a sense, cheerleaders, kind of managing the emotions of the local community at a very difficult time. So one example, this is from a female editor in England who wanted to remain anonymous. She was commenting on a story that she'd done that she thought was particularly memorable. She talked about, she said it was quite sweet. They organized across social media that they would play a certain playlist at a certain time, and everyone played these tracks across the village, and they all went out into the street and they all did socially distanced dancing. I got hold of the video and it was our main story, just something a bit uplifting, even though it was a really gloomy time. And so you get similar kinds of stories from many of our interviewees talking about the importance of actually covering the positive events and initiatives that are taking place in the community despite the dire situation brought on by the pandemic. And so you get examples of stories about things like local people making personal protective equipment, a local guy repairing people's bikes, also children writing letters and sending drawings to care home residents. Those are the ones pictured on the slide here. And a lot of coverage of mutual aid networks to actually help those who are most vulnerable in the community. So just to conclude, what I've tried to reflect today is some of the key findings and shared experiences of the community journalism sector during the pandemic. And really, in a sense, what comes across quite strongly is that this is a moment of crisis which highlights the importance of community journalism, but it also really highlights the financial precarity. And really any consideration of the future of journalism, including community journalism, needs to be informed by the insight that news production can no longer really be driven purely by profit motives. So decisions have to be informed by the idea of community journalism as a public good, which is really vital to a democratic society. And indeed, supporting existing community news providers is essential to the functioning of a healthy democracy. And so more than anything, this research indicates the importance of actually having government foundation and local funding as a kind of lifeline for community news. I should also say that I've presented this research very widely in academic communities, and this is getting to be an increasingly important topic for scholars around the world, coming to terms with the democratic deficit caused by the closure of local newspapers. But at the same time, this is actually the first time I have the opportunity to talk to you as a community of practitioners about this work. And so I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, anything that does reflect or doesn't reflect on your own experience, anything that I've missed out on that's important to you, and obviously any questions that you have for me as well about this research. And I want to thank ICNN and C4CJ for giving me the opportunity to share this research with you. So thank you all very much, and I welcome any questions or comments or reflections on this. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Karen. That was wonderful. I know John is hosting. His screen's blank at the moment, and I'm not sure if he can see the Q&A questions anyway. But we've had a few questions. The first question was from John Cook from A Little Bit of Stone, and he wanted to know if there are any statistics on individuals that operate their hyperlocal alongside any other form of income.
Yes, is the answer. So I can't remember the exact statistics, but a substantial number of community journalism practitioners operate their outlets alongside other employment, either part-time or full-time. And I can dig out those statistics quite easily. But what's very apparent from the interviews is that for many of you, doing community journalism is something that you do alongside doing a kind of day job, or some people characterize it as a day job. For other people, it's very meaningful and important work that you do as your kind of paid main form of paid employment. But what that means is that, and this is something that I've actually also talked a lot about separately. For many of you, what it means is that the kinds of sacrifices that you have to make are not just material in terms of taking a financial hit, but actually also in terms of things like work-life balance. So many of you reported in the interviews that in order to be able to produce content for your outlets, you are working evenings, you're working weekends, and you're frequently sacrificing things like family life and social life as a consequence. So yes, there are many different jobs that all of you do aside from community journalism and alongside community journalism. This is extremely widespread, particularly because of the fact that that's the income that most of you get, even for the most successful outlets, are insufficient to pay all the bills.
Well, thank you. I hope that answered your question, John. He had a follow-up actually, which was, has working from home arrangements helped those with multiple work arrangements to increase their output?
There I didn't have any data from the survey, but I do have some evidence from the interviews. So I think that for a lot of those of you who are working from home and dealing with the lockdown, that created challenges in terms of carrying responsibilities. So a number of our interviewees had small children at home all of a sudden, or in other cases, some of you actually moved to care for elderly parents who might be vulnerable in those situations. So one of the key impacts of the pandemic was to actually increase carrying workload on people. And I heard less examples of people being able to produce more content as a result of the pandemic. That wasn't the kind of typical picture in most cases.
Thank you. And we've got a couple more, few more. We've got quite a lot coming in now. So, Ross Hawkes from Lichfield Live wanted to know, his question was, I'm interested to know if the funding increases experienced also mirrored reader donations for anyone who uses this system. It's something we saw pick up during the pandemic at Lichfield Live and has sustained us as the pandemic impact eased on everyday life. Not mega money, but more than we thought we'd see.
So whether the grant funding mirrored?
Interested to know if the funding increases experienced also mirrored the reader donations.
All right. Yeah. So I think that a number of you reported getting increases in reader donations during the pandemic, and those who signaled that this was most important were those who got, quite a large lump sum, some sort of in the order of thousands of pounds, usually from councils, in some cases from European funding. But for some of you, there was evidence that the activity was sustained because of that kind of reader funding. So I think that's quite an important point to bring up as well, because it's not something that I mentioned in my presentation, but it's something that a lot of you experimented with and also found really useful in the context of the pandemic as a way of almost kind of covering the lack of local advertising revenue.
Thank you. And he's got a follow-up as well. Also interested to know whether or not the advertising spend showed any differences between online and print. He says he mentioned on Twitter that we saw increases in ad revenue during the period. Might be because we were the only show in town as the papers paused or ceased and therefore mopped up ad spend that did remain without a vehicle.
So in most cases, there was a temporary collapse of advertising revenues. There were some organizations or some outlets that picked up new advertising. That might be from businesses that were moving into the area, or indeed in a situation where you had a kind of monopoly on advertising. There were also some cases, and I think, I don't know if Richard Gerner is here with us today, but I remember that Richard talked about how he got some fund, or Richard Gerner is there today. Richard, you can clarify this if I'm mistaken, but I believe that there was a local assembly member or member of parliament who actually put sort of advertising into the Philly Observer because they recognized that this kind of funding was really important. So there were some instances where outlets picked up advertising as a result of the pandemic or associated with the pandemic, but across the board, you did see a huge decline, particularly because of the closure of local events. Okay, Richard says that's right. Our Senate members increased their ad spend with us to help support us.
There was a lot of help from Welsh Government. In fact, they did, not only were they helping out individual organisations, but they ran two independent funds for the Welsh sector here. There's a question from Rob Thompson. Question for your conclusions. Are there any examples where government funding of communities for a range of community action then leads to support for community journalism? So communities themselves decide on the priority for community journalism as part of a broader programme?
Honestly, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head. So obviously, as you all know, the community journalism sector itself is quite new-ish, as at least as a very kind of established and widespread form of news. And we are seeing increasingly, this is true, particularly in countries around Europe, that governments are providing some kind of targeted funding directed at community journalism outlets, but we haven't really seen the kind of outcome of that. So that's more of a kind of watch this space situation where we don't really know what's going to happen down the line.
Thanks, Karen. And finally, one from Phyllis Stephen from the Edinburgh Reporter. You said that more than 41% of those interviewed say they have income of more than 1,000 a month. Any idea what the spread of that sum is between advertising, sponsorship, donations, etc.? Are we heavily dependent on advertising revenue?
yes, again, I have the statistics, but I don't remember them off the top of my head. It occurs to me that what I should do is actually just share the survey findings with all of you, or share the data with all of you so that you can see this, because much of this is actually quite readily apparent from the data. But yes, advertising revenue is by far the most important source of funding. And I think that the reason why I highlighted grant funding as so significant was because in the pandemic, as I mentioned in the presentation, you suddenly got the situation where a lot of local councils and also governments and also foundations suddenly thought, actually, community journalism is extremely important in this situation. So we really need to make sure that this sector survives. So there was a level of recognition of the importance of community journalism, which led to these investments in the form of grant funding. And I think that grant funding has always been there, and many of you have benefited from it in the past, but that kind of accelerated as a result of the pandemic. And then it really benefited particular outlets that were kind of struggling as a result. So that's why I highlighted it. But actually, advertising is by far the most important revenue source according to the survey.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Karen. That was wonderful. I don't think there are any more questions. If anybody wants to ask anything else, you can either put it in the chat and I'll make sure that Karen gets it later on, or you can bring it up in the kind of e-networking session at the end of the day. I'm going to thank you again, Karen. It was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. I was going to say, also feel free to email me. If you Google my name, I'm the only person in the entire world with this name, so I'm very easy to track down. And I welcome your thoughts and your feedback, and I hope that I've accurately reflected your experiences in the pandemic. And I just want to thank you again for giving me this opportunity, and also many thanks for the time that you've all taken in participating in our research. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. I'm going to put you on as an attendee now, and I'm going to go over to John to introduce our next speaker. Thank you again.
Thank you. That was great. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, next up is Dr. Julia Boel. Julia has spent some time working with ICNN this year and putting an awful lot of work in to put together a useful toolkit for community news publishers, which ties in with the sustainability theme of this conference. The toolkit, which is available after this talk on the ICNN C4CJ website, is aimed at both beginners and experienced publishers, and critically features a number of detailed case studies, tips and advice from a number of ICNN members. It's well worth a read and will hopefully offer you all some inspiration. On that note, I'll hand you over to Julia, who can introduce herself in full and talk you through the booklet that she's put together. Thanks.
Hey, thank you so much, John, for that lovely introduction. I only actually heard half of it because I was rejoining. But yeah, so today I'm going to talk to you about a toolkit which has now been published on the ICNN's website. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. So I hope that's working now, and please, if not, please just give me a shout out. Thank you so much for letting me speak today and for introducing the toolkit to you all. Together with Karen, Emma, Matt, John, and several ICNN member organizations, I've had the chance to research the very same challenge that we are discussing today and tomorrow, and that is sustainability. So I've written up a toolkit for news publishers in the past couple of months, and I'd like to present that to you today. The toolkit is now published on C4CJ ICNN's website, and I'm going to share a link later on in the presentation today. It contains information on various revenue streams from online advertising, paywalls, launching a print edition, sponsored content, membership schemes, crowdfunding, grant funding, merchandise, and so on. The target audiences are beginners, but it's also targeted at people who already run a successful news organization. So what's particularly interesting about the toolkit, though, I find, is that it also includes profiles or examples of businesses who have managed to create a sustainable business model out of those revenue streams. So I'm hoping that if you go to ICNN's website and download the toolkit, you're gonna find some inspiration from it. And I guess that's something to look forward to. In the next 20 minutes or so, I'm just going to briefly talk through the revenue streams. And if there's already some information you know, please bear with me, because I know that it's quite a diverse sector. So I'm really targeting this talk to everyone. I'd also like to invite you to use the Q&A box to share any advice that you can think of, because I know that you'll have experience in these different revenue streams. So if there's anything you can think of that's not on the list yet, please feel free to share this. And yeah, let's start with online advertising. And this is interesting for people with a digital news outlet. And basically there are two types of advertising available. First, there's local advertising. And for this, you can approach local businesses and explain why people should advertise with you. And Daniel UNESCO from the Lincolnites, and I do hope that I got his name right, he's talked to me about how he went about this. And when he first got started, he used the explanations, because we were young, because we were fun, because we were, sorry, there's just something on my screen, because we were quick, because we were making positive change, because we have lots of readers. And as soon as he got more established on the media landscape, he shifted the narrative to, we have proven ourselves in the past decade. You know we're here, and you know we're here to serve you. If an advertiser wants to advertise with you, you have the option to charge for page views and clicks, or for time windows. So for example, weekly time slots. And several sustainable ICNN members who I've spoken to, they opted for time windows. And this had a very key reason, which is that you're not reliant on numbers, on page views or clicks. In essence, that means that if your week, for example, isn't going particularly great in terms of numbers, your overall income isn't affected by this. So you would still keep your regular income, essentially. As an alternative or addition to local advertising, there is programmatic advertising. And this is offered through the likes of Google AdSense, Amazon Associates, and the Microsoft Advertising Affiliate Program. And the way it works is basically these organizations use an algorithm based on your location and service to show relevant adverts to the customers, to local customers. But if you want to implement it on your site, the way it works for you is very simple, actually, because I'm told you only add one piece of code to your site, and then you get paid for your monthly visitors, clicks, and so on. So this is just an alternative. I know some ICNN members might feel ambivalent about this, but I just want to throw this into the room as an alternative. The second revenue stream in the toolkit is paywalls. And this is also for digital news outlets. They provide an alternative to advertising, and their key benefit is that they give value to exclusive content and journalism by restricting reader access and encouraging readers to pay for journalism. There are different types of paywalls available. So there's hard paywalls, which restrict the full access. An example where you can see this is actually the Financial Times. So when you click on an article there, you cannot actually see the article. It just says, become an FT subscriber to read on. The second paywall available is freemium paywall. And it basically offers a combination of free and premium content. So you might have seen that on the Telegraph, where you can read the first part of an article, but then you have to pay to continue reading. There's also soft or metered paywalls, and they give access to some free premium content. That sounds confusing, but an example might be where readers can read up to 5 free articles per month before they have to start paying. If you consider implementing a paywall, there's some advice available, or warning even. The first one, and this might be a crucial one, is that paywalls have been successful to different degrees. So I know it's worked for brands like the Times and the Telegraph, but almost all ICNN members rely on other ways of funding. So basically, if it's not clear if it works on a local level, if you still want to try it out or are interested in trying it out, one thing you should do is do your research. So you should think about questions such as, how big is the area you cover? Are there enough potential subscribers? Can your readers get the news for free elsewhere? Because if they do, they might not come to your website. I don't know, but it's something you should think about. If you have installed a paywall, you should constantly produce content that the readers find interesting. And this has a simple reason, because nowadays you're competing with the internet and vast access to free information. Graham Smith, who's already successful with gaining revenue from a paywall when it comes to Colm reports, also suggests that you should work out automatic subscription renewals, because it actually saves you quite a bit of time when you don't have to remind readers that they should renew their subscriptions. Finally, you can also tease the stories that people without subscription might have missed out on, because this has actually worked quite well for NN Journal in Northamptonshire. The third revenue stream is launching a print edition, and a print edition can be an important source of revenue. But when you launch one, or as part of the launch, there are several things you should consider. So first out, there's sustainability, and this essentially answers the question whether you're going to fund it through advertising or whether you're additionally going to charge a cover price. There's also pagination, so how many pages your print edition is going to have. It also should be, if you publish a print edition, the pages should be in multiples of 4 and not have an odd number, because otherwise you're going to end up with a blank page. Then there's also the print run, and when you come up with a number for it, there are several things or factors you can consider, such as the number of people living in your community, the printing costs, the distribution method, and potential revenue gain. Then when it comes to your distribution, you can deliver your print edition or post your print edition to households. You can sell it at local shops or hand it out for free at distribution points. Or as an alternative even, you can choose not to publish a print edition and go digital. So there's the website Issue, I believe that's how you pronounce it, where you can publish it. Then for the content, you should think about your stories. If you already have a website, what's going to be published on the website as opposed to the print edition, and the other way around. For your design, it's important to think about your news advertising ratio. And you can also think about your readers. So when you design, are you serving older demographics, for example? So you might want to opt for a larger font size. Most or a lot of ICNN members who publish a successful print edition, they've had initial funding available to take this off the ground. And for this, they used grant funding, crowdfunding, sponsorship deals even, but you might also want to try it with advertising. So if you want to try it with advertising, again, you can actively approach local businesses, and it might help for this to use statistics of your potential reach, mock-up of your paper, and an advertising rate card. If you're successful, it might also help to ask for referrals, because you can contact their connections and essentially refer back to the businesses who already took out advertising. So it might help sort of to create a chain reaction in getting advertising. If you're not successful, there's no harm in asking the businesses in a few months' time again and just going back to them. When you're launching a print edition, you should plan your budget carefully, and you should also talk to other editors who are successful at publishing a print edition, because I'm sure that they might actually have some very valuable advice talking to you. And one thing you should also consider is handing out supplements and publishing a business directory, because this has actually generated quite some extra income for some ICNN members. So yeah. The fourth revenue stream is sponsored content, and this is for both online and print publishers. You can sell sponsored content on top of advertising, and sponsored content essentially works in that it looks like editorial content, but is paid for by an advertiser with the aim of promoting a company or product. Sponsored content is quite popular with advertisers because research shows that it resonates more with audiences, it's easy to recall, and readers also tend to view the brand favorably. I know that some ICNN members are ambivalent about this revenue stream. One key advantage is that it's guaranteed income. So this is mostly because advertisers tend to take out sponsored content repeatedly. So they might choose to write a column and commit to writing sponsored content every month and so on. If you do want to sell sponsored content, you should definitely make it a condition to keep editorial control. And you should also highlight the content is sponsored, because it can otherwise damage your reputation and editorial integrity. Membership schemes. I know that Richard Gerner, who I've also spoken to a few months ago, he's going to present later on today, so I'm going to keep this brief. Membership schemes, they essentially ask your readers for a regular payment, and in exchange you can offer several rewards. So for readers, you can offer the great feeling of supporting local journalism, independent local journalism. You can also offer name credit in a dedicated section of supporters, exclusive content and members updates. For sponsoring businesses, you can also offer free advertising space or editorial articles, but this is not an exhaustive list. So if you want to find out more, just download the toolkit on the ICNN's website. Some things you should do though, if you're considering launching a membership scheme, or if you already have a membership scheme, you should explain why people should support your publication and what benefits they can get out of it. You can also compare the membership price to an everyday experience, such as the price of a coffee, pint, or cinema ticket, because it makes the price look less high. That makes sense. And maybe most importantly, you should focus on your readers and make sure that your readers value what you do, even though I'm sure that they already do that. The sixth revenue stream is crowdfunding. And thanks to the internet, just about anyone can fundraise money for creative projects and businesses now. I know that a lot of ICN members have taken advantage of this already, so they've generated several hundreds and even thousands of pounds. And there's two crowdfunding models of interest, I think. First one is donations, which ask individuals to support the growth of your publication by donating money. And the second one is the rewards model, which gives out in rewards in exchange for donations. And for example, rewards are free, cheaper, or pre-publication access, shout-outs, free adverts, or a chance to meet the editor even. You can offer different rewards with increased donations. So the idea behind this is essentially that you encourage donors or backers to give more money or to donate more money, because the higher they pledge, the better the rewards essentially. In any case, you should keep the rewards simple though, because they can end up taking a lot of time and money out of your pocket. So be careful with rewards. When it comes to crowdfunding, there are 4 stages available. First up, we have the preparation. And in this stage, you should think about your crowdfunding model and platform, your rewards, the timeline and budget plan, the crowdfunding target and pitch, your campaign posts, and you can also start teasing your project in your publication and on social media. The second stage is quite important because the pitch actually convinces backers or donors why they should donate. So a good pitch tends to be short, punchy, personal, and clear on the value. And it also answers the questions: who are you? What do you hope to do and why? Why should people donate? So what do they get out of it? And how will you spend the money, and what will you do if you raise more than your target? Additionally, you can also include timelines, readers' comments, and visually appealing films and images in your pitch. The third stage of crowdfunding is fundraising, and in this stage, you should get the message out, post on your site, social media, even contact businesses. So be active and create new content regularly. You should also celebrate milestones, and you can get your audience involved. So you might have seen this already, but for example, you can offer crowdfunding activities. So walking, hiking, cycling for your publication. Most importantly, though, I think you should keep encouraging donations. In the fourth stage, this is the post-campaign stage, you should thank your crowd because it shows gratitude and it also helps build connections. You should send out the rewards if you choose to give out any. And finally, you can use your success to pitch to funding bodies, sponsors, or investors, because a successful campaign shows that there's a market for it and that people want your product. Here's also some final advice when it comes to crowdfunding. First up, budget carefully because you don't want to spend too much money on rewards. Second, look at the fine print. So some crowdfunding platforms take commissions of your donations. So you might want to consider this in your crowdfunding target when you set a target. Depending on the crowdfunding platform you use, you may also have to return the donations if you don't hit the crowdfunding target. So this happens with, for example, Kickstarter. And I've also had the pleasure to speak with Mark McGinley a few months ago, and he's been really successful at crowdfunding in order to launch Pack and Peculiar, Dulwich Diverter, and the Lewisham Ledger. And he's also got some advice for you, and it's essentially, you've got to factor in that not everything is going to go perfect. If you do fail, there's no reason for you not to try again. I know that Karen's spoken of the amazing possibility of grant funding, so I'm also just going to highlight your attention to this. There are several funding bodies who offer grants to community journalism organizations. For example, and this list is again not very exhaustive, the European Journalism Centre, the Public Interest News Foundation, the Google News Initiative, and many more. If you want a more comprehensive list, you can download the toolkit yet again. You can also check with your councillors and local councils if grant funding may be available, because I know there have been some organizations who have received financial support as a result of just a conversation. What makes a good and successful grant application? There's no real answer to this, and you should always refer to the selection criteria of a grant program. But in the past few months, I've had the opportunity to speak to organizations and ICNN members who've been successful at securing grants. And I've also had the chance to look through their grant applications and what made them successful. And based on this, I would say that successful applications in the past provided background on the news outlet and how it's made a difference to the community. They also explained the value of the work, established distinct and achievable objectives for the funding. They provided a detailed timeline and budget plan. They used numbers, quotes, and audience insights. So this can include your website statistics, print runs, and so on. They also included plenty of examples, so you can use your stories for this, for example. And they kept the language clear and simple, and they were prepared well in advance of the deadline and submitted on time. Then merchandise. If it goes well, it has quite some advantages. First, it creates a brand identity and increases brand visibility. It's also a brilliant marketing tool, and ideally it makes you money. There are two different models available. First up, there's traditional merchandising. In this, you're in charge of the whole process. So this includes buying and printing products, creating designs, managing printing and fulfilling orders. Second up, there is print-on-demand merchandising, and for this you use third-party providers. These tend to take a commission, and it's quite expensive, I think, but they also offer the full service from printing to shipping. So there are some advantages and disadvantages to both. The financial gain can be higher for traditional merchandising, but there's also more risk and work involved because you invest your own money in it, essentially. If you do want to try out merchandise, the design needs to grab attention and ultimately convince the readers to buy your products. Some advice for this is think about your audience, research trending products to find out what works well, for example, and draw on visuals. So this can be your logo, or it can be a striking slogan, which captures attention or resonates with your audience or readers. Then if you promote your merchandise line, you can use your publication and social media. You can also use community models or share your photos of readers. For example, wearing clothes or with mugs, etc. Finally, you can also give it to local celebrity interview partners because they will promote it for you. Then I know that there's also other ways to generate additional revenue as a news publisher, and I know we've sort of touched upon this, and some ICNMers are doing a variety of things. So for example, creative agency work. This includes PR, marketing, advertising, content creation, and so on. You can freelance, you can provide research and printing services, you can do website design, building and hosting, you can lecture and tutor even, or you can provide training workshops or courses. So for example, on how to write a newsworthy press release. I've now given you a brief overview of the toolkit and what to expect. If you're interested in finding out more, you can download the toolkit on ICNN's website, and the link is just provided on the screen. Although I'm sure that Matt might send around an email at some point to bring your attention to this eventually. Some things to look forward to are more information, because I've only touched on some things. Also the business success stories that I mentioned in the beginning, so keep your eyes open for this. And there's also ICNN voices on all the different revenue streams. So download a free copy. Do you have any final questions for me, or do you have any advice as part of the presentation that's come up based on your experience that you want to share, something like that?
Thanks for that, Julia. That was really interesting, and you've obviously put an awful lot of work into that in terms of you know, the in-depth interviews that you've carried out with a lot of ICNN members. So thank you for that. You've got a couple of questions kind of come through. The first one's from John Cook, who says, we raised £15,000 a few years back via a crowdfunding campaign. My recommendations would be to have offline donations ready to drop when your campaign starts, so that you don't start at £0 on the campaign pledge when you go live. Is that something that you found during your research, that that's a good idea, or any other things that you can offer?
I think that's actually quite a good idea, because the thing is, when it's more appealing to donors when you already see that people have donated and that you're not the first, because essentially in your mind it suggests that that idea is worth funding because other people have already funded your idea. So I think that's really valuable advice. So thank you very much, John Cook.
Great. And the second question is from Philip John. He asks, with so many funding options to explore, how can publishers best choose between them, or should they do a bit of everything?
That is a great question. The thing is, I haven't actually researched that. I suppose what might be interesting is, the thing is, it's also a very diverse sector. So I would say it depends very much where you're based and what your audience is, how large your audience is. So it might be interesting to research your target audiences first before you decide on what you want to do. And I think also it could help to talk to other publishers who have already experience with these different revenue streams. So maybe there might actually be opportunity to ask that question again later on today when some news publishers are speaking today or tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah, thanks so much for that, Julia. It's like I say, there's a lot of detail, gone into that, and I'd encourage people specifically to, tap into the case studies that you carried out. So there's a wealth of really good ideas and some inspiration that people may get.
Well, as I said, it's really just a snippet though of the toolkit. So there's actually 28 pages of information in it, and also all the case studies, which I think some of you might find inspiring for the reason that it actually shows how people have done this. And they also gave some really good advice on and advice that you might not think about when you try and do this yourself. So I think it's definitely worth downloading a copy, and it's free. So yeah, take a look.
We have one more questions just dropped in from Milo Perrin. Google AdSense doesn't give us. Google AdSense doesn't give much to us. Any research into average CPC income for ICNN members who use it?
I must admit that I've actually spoken more to people who use time windows. So I suppose my research is a bit biased in that sense, and I cannot actually tell you much more about this, but I highlighted it because it is an additional revenue stream and you can still generate money off of it. So even if you don't make much money out of it, it's still additional money. So that's the reason why I highlighted it. But I do have to say that most of the sustainable businesses I spoke to, they used time windows for this.
Okay, and just one more question from Rob Thompson. He says, yes, great work, comprehensive, but a question we need the answer to is how can we become community journalists or reporters without having to sign up to publishers, advertisers and online global brands? I know this is not the purpose of your talk, which as I said is great. Looking forward to reading the toolkit.
That is a great question, and I think my answer might be a cheeky one, but I think that might be the reason why we're here today and tomorrow discussing this. I suppose if you already have a website, it's a good start. You might find paywalls interesting, although as I said, it's still a question whether you actually want to go down this route because it's still not clear whether it might work. So perhaps that's something you might want to look into, paywalls then. But yeah, perhaps there's also more inspiration you find from the coming talks.
Yeah, I mean, certainly from my point of view, Wesley's Dispatch, where we don't take advertising or use tap into online global brands. We're very much kind of sustained by local people in terms of donating money and also we do get more than our fair share of grants through the social purpose that we kind of offer. So maybe those are two areas that Rob could start to look into. Matt, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I wanted to just to highlight the great responses that we've been having in the chat box about the toolkit. People are saying that it's very, very interesting, wishing that they'd had it when they started, and that they're going to get straight off this conference in a minute and go read it by the looks of things. But don't leave us just yet, because we do have conversations that revolve around some of these discussions later on, particularly with regards to signing up global brands. There is a conversation taking place, I think it's tomorrow, on collective advertising, so we'll be able to discuss things like that then. And there is a question that's come in the chat box from A Skinner saying, if I'm launching a hyperlocal Substack this Friday, what immediate advice can you give? Before I give it to Julia, I know that we have a talk tomorrow from Joshua Herman, who set up Manchester Mill and recently the Sheffield Tribune, and we also have Natalie Bloomer from the NN Journal, who will be discussing their Substack models. But Julie, do you have any experience of that during the research?
I spoke with Natalie Bloomer and Sarah Ward from NN Journal, and to me, it actually sounds like a fantastic idea to generate initial revenue or to generate revenue in general. What might help is having already subscribers, so initial subscribers, which you can then charge later on. So I think there's more, yeah, but I would say my advice would be sort of getting that initial audience base ready before you start charging. because you already have, if you already have your trusted followers, they might want to pay to continue reading your news.
Absolutely.
Great.
One more question, I think, in the chat box. Where does everyone find the time to implement new ideas? This is from Daniel Webb from Wiltshire Today. Where does everyone find the time to implement new ideas and run new projects? I work alone and all my time is taken up by writing news. If I didn't spend all my time writing news, my figures would be dramatically lower. Yeah. I guess we'll leave that one for everybody in the chat to answer and have a discussion amongst themselves. Again, there is a session at the end of the day where we can discuss things like this. So,
before, I don't know if there's any more questions for me, but before I end my talk, can I just say a huge thank you to Matt, John, Karen, and Emma, and also all the ICNN member organizations who I've had a chance to speak to in the past couple of months. Because without them, this toolkit wouldn't have been possible, and all this valuable advice, I hope it's valuable, it wouldn't be here today. So thank you so much for all your help with this.
Oh, you're more than welcome, isn't she, John? I mean, it was a pleasure working on the toolkit. It's something we wanted to. I mean, we have a bunch of resources on the website already, but to put it all in one place and to make it really accessible, like Julia's done, is fantastic. So we're really excited to launch that today. It's on Twitter. Follow the links. Go to the website. Download it. It's in PDF format. Share it with your teams and with your friends. And the more people that read it, the more opportunity we have to grow this sector and to keep it growing and keep it going. So thank you, Julia.
Hope you managed to grab a cup of tea and what have you in the break. I'm going to kick off this afternoon's session, which is entirely filled with ICNN publishers who are here to kind of offer the wisdom of them. The wisdom of their experience, which I'm really excited about, and I must admit the next speaker is one of my heroes when it comes to independent publishers. It's true, Richard. Richard Gerner runs the Carefully Observer, which he set up in 2009 as a local news website covering the Carefully County Borough in South Wales. Carefully Observer was developed into a full-time business in August 2011, and within 2 years successfully launched a fortnightly print edition with a circulation of 10,000 full-colour tabloid newspaper. The paper has been named Independent Community News Service of the Year at the Wales Media Awards on multiple occasions. Richard this afternoon is going to talk about the Observer's membership scheme and why he believes it's absolutely necessary for future sustainability. So I'll put you over into the very capable hands of Richard. So over to you, Richard. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks, John, for that introduction. I'm not too sure about hero. I just basically muddle along like the best of us, really. But yeah, like most of you guys, it's been a really challenging time over the last sort of 18 months. Back in May 2020, it became really clear to me that we needed to do something radical to basically survive the pandemic. So I'll give you, I know John spoke a little bit about our history, but I'll go over it again if that's okay. I started the website in 2009 when I was working for the Argus, the Brighton Argus. And then, yeah, it basically just a part-time thing alongside my day job. In 2011, then I moved back home to Wales and took that on full time. And then in 2013, we managed to get some funding from Caerphilly County Borough Council to launch the print edition, our fortnightly print edition. And that's when things really took off for us because our advertising revenue then really started coming in terms of print advertising. So it was always a struggle to get digital advertising at the very beginning. So the challenges that people are facing now in terms of digital. They've always existed. So we started the print edition in 2013, and had a few bumps along the way, but things were generally going okay. We got enough revenue to take on a reporter, our first full-time staff member. Managed to get my own little delivery van to deliver the newspapers, and we also managed to get our own commercial office space, which later turned out to be crucial when the pandemic hit. So fast forward to March 2020, when the pandemic hit. It was a really, really scary time. All of a sudden, everything that I thought I knew about my business completely transformed, literally overnight. Our advertising revenue, it wasn't an immediate hit, but we had lots of advertisers who had signed up for longish term deals, and then they just let them run out. So we had a lot of advertisers just not renew. There was a local co-op that opened, and we had 2 lovely full-page adverts booked with them. And in the edition after the pandemic, they phoned up saying, well, we don't want to advertise. So again, that was 300 quid lost. And yeah, it was a really scary time. I remember thinking, what do we do? Do we carry on advertising? Do we carry on publishing? Do we carry on, or do we stop the print edition? And my thinking was, well, we have some advertising revenue. It's better to have some than none. So let's carry on printing. And I'm really glad I did that, because I truly believe that if we'd stopped then we wouldn't have been able to start going again. So it was really fortunate that I had a really solid team around me, and that we were quite nimble and adaptive, so that we could do the whole work from home thing. But yeah, by May, it had become really apparent that I really needed to get going with reader revenue. We had dipped our toe in the water in October 2019. I basically just put in a little voucher in the newspaper that readers can fill in with a check, and then we'll send out a newspaper to them, and that was it. And that was, I think we offered it for about £40 back then, and we had about 5 people sign up off that one advert, which was encouraging. But again, one of the mistakes we made then was that we didn't continue that. We just thought, well, that'll be great, 5, and then we just didn't push that for some reason. So we dipped our toe into the water a little bit. But come May, it was pretty obvious that we really needed to start concentrating on generating alternative sources of revenue other than advertising. So I sort of kind of just jumped straight in, and I signed up to a website called Pico, P-I-C-O, and that was a payments platform, basically, or a membership platform. So I just jumped straight into that, expecting loads of people to come in, but that didn't happen. That was live on our website for about probably say about 2 to 3 weeks, and nothing really happened. We managed to get loads of people sign up and basically register with that platform, but we didn't have anybody converting to members. And again, it was a bit of a head scratcher as to, well, what are we doing wrong here? But anyway, with Pico, I soon realized that the more people you had registered, it's going to start costing me. So I thought, well, that's not the right platform for us. I don't want to end up with a cost before we have any revenue being generated from it. So I did a bit more research, and I came across a platform called Steady, and that, I think, is a German-based platform, and they take a flat 10% revenue. So whatever revenue you generate from your readers, they'll take 10% and you keep the rest, which I thought was great. And it was really easy to implement. It was, again, just a couple of lines of code on the website, and that was it. Away we went. I thought, great, we'll have loads of people, but we didn't. We managed from May to about July. We managed to sign up about 30 people to that, which again wasn't amazing, but it was a start. But then when things really started to change for us, was when I managed to get onto a course paid for by Google and run by the Financial Times, FT Strategies. And that was like a week's intensive course into generating reader revenue. And that was when I realized all of the mistakes I'd made up until that point. So I just thought it was going to be a simple case of, you know, putting the technology on the website and away we go. And in fact, there is a lot of work that I just completely missed out. And that's the key reason that we didn't really have the amount of people joining us as I thought we would. So the big thing that I learned on that week was you have to put your audience at the center of what you do. And from that, you start getting lots of other benefits. So for example, if you concentrate on what your readers actually want and why they use your website, then you will be able to serve them in a much more better way. And also, it means you can also then look at your resources in a way that perhaps you didn't before. So when you start looking actually at the statistics of the website and trying to find out what stories do well for who and why they do well, then you'll be able to sort of concentrate a bit more on the things that maybe other newspapers or other media outlets don't do. And for me, it's all about trying to explain stuff to people. That's our big thing at the moment. Is there's lots of information out there on the internet. Not everybody knows how civic life works. So when we write a story, for example, now instead of saying, the council's plan committee recommended a section 106 for this particular development, it's like, well, what is a 106 agreement? Maybe our readers don't know that. So again, we really started to concentrate on trying to explain processes behind decisions while we do the stories about these decisions. And then we started to communicate that then to our readers. This is what we do. We try and explain things in context. And as a result of that, then we started to see our members steadily growing. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes done on audience research, trying to figure out exactly what our users, our readers use our website for, and trying to satisfy their needs. And again, it's all about engagement. It's no good us kind of just putting stuff out there and just expecting it to work. We need to start developing more of a two-way conversation with readers and basically bringing them into the fold. And the idea is that the more readers we have engaged with us, the more value they will see us doing for the community, and the more willing then they're ready to support us. So when I say support us, we've got 3 tiers on our membership scheme. The first one is £3 a month, and that is that's for readers to basically use our website without any adverts. For £4 a month, then again, use our website without adverts, but we'll send out the reader a digital version of our print newspaper. And then for £5 a month, then we'll actually send them out a hard copy, the actual newspaper. So again, it took quite a bit of time to sort of work out the pricing structures and what felt right, and you know, what also aligned with what we tried before. So for example, the £40 a year for the print subscription, you know, after postage was deducted, we were making about £15 per year per reader from that. So again, that doesn't really line up with somebody taking out a £3 a month membership with us. So now that we've deducted the cost of postage from the £5 a month option, which again gives us a revenue of £60 a year, that pretty much evens out our revenue from each reader. But again, it's taken a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of mistakes to get there. And going back to the technology platform, after this Financial Times course that I attended, it became clear that the Steady platform that I was using didn't meet the needs of what we needed to do. So for example, with Steady, there was no option to register readers as a first step to get them down, I hate using this term, but the sales funnel, basically get them down the funnel to convert into members. So there was no way of doing that. But I had a quick look again online, and instead of trying to find one that ticked all of our boxes, I basically had to try and find one that ticked most of our boxes. And again, that was all weighed against the resources that we had, because even though I've got, I'm lucky enough to have a developer on board, he's tied up with another project. So quite a lot of this implementation landed on my shoulders, that I had to try and work out and figure the best thing to do. And again, in terms of platforms, it's always tricky that if you go on one, you could end up being stuck with one, and then you're stuck with that one for an infinite amount of time. So the one that we eventually decided on was called MemberStack. And unlike Steady, MemberStack took a lower percentage, but there is like a monthly payment that you do have to pay. But unlike the first one, Pico, that isn't dependent on how many members you have registered, so or rather readers registered. So we can register as many readers as we want with MemberStack, so then we can sort of like work out the readers who are more likely to convert to members. But again, that's a monthly cost that I have to sort of consider at the beginning. But the cost of running MemberStack now, with around 100 members that we have, is far cheaper than what it would have been with Steady. So yeah, I'm happy with that. But again, one of the main benefits with MemberStack is that we own the customer, or we own the member relationship, so to speak. So with Steady, users would press the button to sign up, then they would be taken to another website where they had to enter their details and card payments, and then they would have to be redirected to our website. And to me, it felt a bit messy for the reader experience, but also we didn't process the payments. So if I wanted to migrate to another platform in the future, I would have had to basically take I would have had to persuade all of our Steady members to sign up to another platform. So I wanted to do that when the numbers were relatively small, rather than further down the line. And with MemberStack now, all the sign up happens on our website, so our readers don't have to leave our website to sign up. They stay on our website. We hold their billing details through Stripe, which we were already using to process card payments for advertisers. So if we do want to migrate to a new platform in the future, we've got our member details, so we can just input that into a new platform. So that's a key benefit for us, in that we, if we ever do get into a position where we do need to change the platform, we can do that relatively straightforwardly, without then going through the whole rigmarole of asking readers to sign up once again and enter their details into another system once again. So again, that was a really big test. But again, the big thing that came out of the FT strategies course for me was the emphasis that was placed on understanding the reader. And earlier, I think Karen talked about the number of hours people worked. I know that quite a lot of you do spend a significant amount of time putting content out there. And is that content, my question would be, is that content actually being read? And is it of use? Is it something that people can get elsewhere? If it is, then you know, is it worth you putting it on your website? You know, so my big thing at the moment is, you know, what can we add to something that's already out there? How can we explain something better to our readers? How can we engage our readers in a way that perhaps the bigger newspapers or the bigger websites in our area don't? And from that, we can work out exactly what our readers want, and then we can dedicate our resources to that. So again, we're not sort of spending all of our time doing stuff that isn't read. I suppose it's a case of less is more. You know, it's not about trying to do everything, which again I've certainly been guilty of in the past, but it's trying to do fewer things better. And if we can do that and demonstrate the value to our communities, then, you know, we can get the revenue in. Because even though advertising is still an important part of the jigsaw, I can't see a future where we are solely supported or funded by advertising. The newspaper is still economical to print at the moment, and it still makes money. About 60% of our overall revenue is from display print advertising. If you include public notices and alcohol license notices, that is 72%. And again, if we were struck by some other financial disaster where companies stopped advertising, then again the business is in such a state that, you know, it would be really affected. And I don't want to run a service that is dependent on the success of other businesses, because what we do is for the reader. So we need to try and persuade them to support us. And if we do just go down the route of just relying solely on digital ad revenue, then I just don't think the numbers stack up either. You know, I always draw the example of a local skip company here in Caerphilly that would have traditionally advertised with the local newspaper or on the local website, but now they can advertise through Facebook, Google ads as well, and those Google ads don't just appear on websites, they appear you know, in games, in apps. And the scale that these platforms operate on, and the cost to really target customers, I don't think we can compete on that. So again, to get that advertising revenue in is a real long, hard slog. And I just think if we're doing all of this work for readers, then it makes sense then for them to contribute. I know I've seen a couple of questions come up, so I think I'll end it there. So I'm happy to open this up. John, if you want to do what you need to do with the questions, or do I just read them off?
No, I'll happily kind of read them for you. So yeah, thanks so much for that, Richard. Really interesting, and a lot of interesting interaction on social media as well about it, just reading there. So yeah, so we've got a few questions for you. First one by John Cook, who asks, how do advertisers feel about you offering a subscription model that means their ads won't be shown to a percentage of your readership? Good question.
Yeah, it is a great question. Ultimately, if you're an advertiser, you want your adverts to be seen by people. So as long as you can deliver that inventory, then they honestly don't mind. I've got two, and again, I haven't got that many local advertisers online. I've got two really solid, really loyal readers. But again, I'm not I got two really solid advertising. But again, I'm not relying on a lot of people signing up to be members. So, for example, at the height of the pandemic, we were hitting something like 80,000 users a month. We're now down to about 50,000 users a month, and that's because we decided to come off Facebook a little bit and try and develop a more direct relationship with readers. But again, out of those 50,000 readers every month on our website, we will be in a really solid position if just 1,000 of those signed up. So again, I'm not expecting everybody to sign up because I know that people aren't maybe in a position to sign up. So those people who want to access our service and can't pay, you know, the advertisers will support them effectively. But again, it's a numbers game. If we just get like, you know, between 800 to 1,000 members, then we're on a real solid footing, and then any additional revenue that comes into advertising is a bonus.
Cool, great stuff. Just in the chat, Amanda replies, appreciate your honesty about the trial and error process of developing membership. The mixed income model is definitely the way forward. So a good point there, I think. And before I lose it in the chat, A Skinner asks, hi Richard, how are you analysing who's reading and when?
So again, this is, again, everything is a work in progress. That's what I've learned over the last 18 months. I've sort of rediscovered my zeal for experimentation. So like 10 years ago, back in 2009, when I started the website, it was very much like, oh, let's give this a go, let's see what happens. And then as we grew and we got a responsibility to readers, I started, I think, becoming a bit more conservative in how I approach things. So again, in terms of analysing readers' habits, I'm trying to move away now from Google Analytics, which is okay, which is good for sort of like hard figures, such as X thousands of readers per month, or you know, 100,000 page impressions. But what I want to start looking at is how long do these readers stay on here on our website? What's their journey? You know, they go, you know, where do they click on the website? And again, it's all about experimentation. So something I've been looking at the moment is called Heap Analytics, and the website is heap.io. I started having a look at that because that integrates really well with MemberStack. So I can see that when somebody logs in using our system, I can see how long they've been on the website for, and basically judge how they use the website really. And again, it's all about getting that. It's all about getting that reader feedback really.
Cool, great stuff. Next question. Stefan from crowboroughlife.com says, thanks for the session. Could you explain in more detail how you put readers at the middle of what you do? How do you know what your readers and supporters want? Do you do surveys, or do you have a panel of readers, or something else?
Yeah, at the moment, I very much rely on surveys, but I'm really interested in opening up the newsroom. So all the work that Bureau Local's been doing at the moment with their open newsroom initiative, that I'm very interested in. And again, it's all about pulling people in. So yeah, at the moment, it's very limited to surveys. And I do have a chat to members every now and then. I phone them up and say, hiya, how you doing? And try and get a bit of feedback that way. And I do a monthly newsletter out as well to our supporters, to our members, basically telling our story, any significant news from us and some of the stuff that we've been doing, some of the big stories that we've been looking at. The fact that we won the BBC's LDRS contract earlier this year, and our reporter started in July. Again, telling people, we wouldn't be in a position to do that without your support. So thank you. But again, it's a process, it's an ongoing process, really.
Cool, great stuff. Phyllis Stephen asks, Richard, is your paper sold or handed out for free? That obviously impacts on where your revenue comes from.
Yeah, so our print product is free. We go to, I think the last count, we go to about 80 different shops, garages. Well, we used to go to the libraries, but not anymore. So yeah, it's about I think it's about 80 odd different outlets that I deliver the newspaper to, and then they're free to pick up then for people. But again, the mistake that we made is not having that coupon in the paper back in October 2019. We now have that in every edition, and I put a little number on that as well, so that when we do get those back in the post, because not all our readers are online and they like the printed newspaper delivered to them, when we get that back in the post, then I know exactly what edition people signed up with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. Okay, next question. As someone who still has a foot firmly in the job elsewhere camp, I wonder whether you'd advise people to take the gamble and jump to try and do their publications part or full-time. And would part-time even be something that you would think would work given the uncertainty of the sector and the work that we do? And it's Ross Hawkes who's asked that.
You have to judge your own personal circumstances. So back in 2011, 10 years ago, I moved from Brighton back to Caerphilly. I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have children, just recently married, and I basically built up a bit of a war chest. I knew that the jump was coming, and I knew that I had to sort of make a clean break and give this a go. So I built up a bit of a personal war chest. So I managed. I gave myself 6 months basically. I was like, right, if I'm not earning X amount, in 6 months' time, then I'll call it quits and get a normal job. And for the first 5 months, things went really badly. And then month number 6, I managed to get a freelance job, doing a bit of freelance copywriting. And again, it was a case of, well, it doesn't matter where the money's coming from, as long as I can get that money in. But again, I got that copywriting job on the back of Caerphilly Observer. I was able to use that as a showcase then of like my work, like, this is what I've done for the last 2 years. So again, that was sort of like indirect revenue from Caerphilly Observer. So again, really lucky to get that money in. Then I managed to get myself a regular freelance gig. So again, that gave me solid revenue coming in. Again, that was all off the back of the work I'd done with Caerphilly Observer. So yeah, it's difficult to make that jump, but if you feel that you're in a position where you can do that, then do that. There is nothing wrong with doing freelance jobs alongside what you do, as long as they're compatible.
Cool, good answer. Ben asks, in the same way that you proactively approach advertisers, do you do that with readers to sell memberships? So, for example, if you do a story on a rugby club, would you mention to the club representative you spoke to that that memberships keep your business running?
Yes. Yes, simple answer.
Good answer.
Believe it or not, quite a lot of people out there, the general public, do not understand the business side of the media or newspapers. Quite a lot of people say, if you give your newspaper away for free, how do you make money? And it's like, well, from the advertising. And then they go, oh, right, yeah, we didn't even realize that. So again, part of this drive of mine is to start educating readers on what we do. And if that means being a little bit open and honest with our figures and revealing how much we do actually make, then, you know, that's what I've been doing. And again, I do a regular mail out. I do a regular email once a month, appealing to readers who've signed up to our daily newsletter, just basically explaining that, yeah, you know, it is really difficult to get advertising out there. You know, if you want us to continue, help us, and that always tends to generate at least a couple of new members every month. So, you know, and again, this isn't going to be an overnight thing. This is slow and steady. So yeah, that's another key thing. You don't expect to sort of turn the tap on. It's going to be a long drip to fill the bath.
Cool. Another question from Amanda. Out of interest, did you look at, and I'm not sure how you pronounce this, is it Ko-fi or Ko-fi? So it's Ko-fi as a platform. I've just signed up to this and it seems really user-friendly and cost-effective, but I recognise there are some things it won't do for us.
Haven't even heard of that. And again, it's really, you've really got to keep on top of this stuff because there's new platforms coming out all the time. So again, as I said before, if it ticks most of your boxes, and this is why you've got to sort of like spend the time and think exactly what you want. So with us, it was like, I want people to be able to register as readers. Then I want some sort of mechanism then that we can work out what they're reading. And I also want something that's easy to implement on our website, something that integrates with Stripe. So, you know, that ticked most of our boxes. So if that ticks most of your boxes, then do that.
Cool. Lots of comments coming in about that. So
I'll have a look at that later.
Yeah, good. Another question from Daniel. I agree publishers need other income streams as time goes on, especially as Google and Taboola, etc. continue to reduce their payments. I do 1 million page views a month, and even that's not sustainable. I previously tried to ask people to support us by making small monthly payment, but it was ridiculed for it. 10 signed up at £5, and after the first wave, that was it. Other than ad-free experience, what do readers get for your £3 sub?
A bit of interaction, a bit of engagement from us. You know, every month I'll send out a letter, I'll send out an email explaining some of our milestones that we've done. You know, looking at some of the big stories that we've covered and just basically thanking them and making them feel involved and listening to their suggestions, not just kind of like, you know, paying lip service to it. And, you know, hopefully as things return back to normal, you know, I want to start doing events and start meeting our people, start meeting our members face to face. And again, that's why I'm really interested in the Bureau Local. I want to open up our newsroom, and because again, and that's been a difficult, not a difficult process for me, but it's been a little bit of an alien concept because I'm very much a traditional NCTJ trained journalist. You know, from an era perhaps where the big editor was the big editor who made all the decisions. And I think we definitely need to move away from that model, and we need to start bringing people in. We need to start listening to our communities and finding out the stories that they want us to tell, and bring them in.
Yeah, cool. That's an interesting one about events. We at Wesley's Dispatch, we've got a very small membership scheme. We've only got about 60 supporters, but we're just doing a social event like in next week at a pub. Just come along, meet the editor, come along for a chat. You know, let's celebrate, you know, the dispatch and what have you. You know, we've got about 15 people kind of signed up already. So stuff like that is something that we're starting to do as well. One question from Phyllis Stephen, who says, "I love your enthusiasm. Where can we see your latest print issue, please? Do we have to be a member?"
Yeah, but I'm sure for ICNN members, I can distribute a link for our latest print edition to view it digitally, so that's no problem.
Cool.
If I can do that somehow.
Great, thank you. Anybody got any more questions? I had lots there, I think. If nothing else, I'd like to say thank you, Richard, for your time.
No, thank you. I hope I made sense. So apologies. It's been a bit of a rough. It's been a bit of a rough few months on the personal side of things. So I haven't really been able to dedicate that much time to work, if you can call it that. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that was really interesting. Lots of good tips. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Matt, is there something you wanted to add?
Nothing at all. I just wanted to say thanks very much, Richard. It's been a pleasure having you as always.
Thank you.
And yeah, if it'd be great if you could share a link with me, and I'll share it with members of the latest edition. Is that possible?
Yeah, no problem. I don't know how. Should I just email it to you? Is that easier?
Yeah, just email me the link and
Okay,
I'll send it out.
Do that.
General roundup.
Cool. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. I'm going to bump you down now.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Cheers, buddy. Okay. I'm just going to bump up the permissions list. Rhiannon, just bear with me one moment.
Brilliant. I'll start to introduce Rhiannon. As you're sorting the tech out.
Yep, that's done.
So next up, we have Rhiannon Davis, who I heard speak at last week's Bureau Local event, and I found really interesting and inspiring to kind of hear you talk then. Rhiannon is the founder and managing editor of Greater Govanhill community magazine, which is available in both print and online. This not-for-profit social enterprise takes a solutions-focused approach to stories that matter to the neighbourhood and provides a platform for underrepresented voices in the community. It offers workshops, training and events to allow the residents of Govanhill to feed into the magazine, and it empowers people to tell their own stories in their own words. So I'd like to introduce you to the inspirational Rhiannon Davis, who's going to talk about running a successful solutions-focused community journalism magazine. Rhiannon.
Thanks very much, John, and thanks for that intro. You've taken away my intro there, so I'll just skip to the next bit. It's fine. So I'm just going to talk today about my kind of story, I guess, through the launch, how the magazine got started, touching on some of the stuff that Richard was talking about, how we kind of keep going, and yeah, just giving you the story. And feel free to jump in with questions anytime. I'm happy to take questions as we go along, or we can do questions at the end. Yeah, so for people that don't know, I mean, probably most people here, Govanhill is an area in the south side of Glasgow, which is one of the most multicultural areas in Scotland. It's one of the most densely populated neighbourhoods, and it's also one of the most deprived. It also happens to fall in Nicola Sturgeon's constituency. And for whatever reason, probably a combination of some of those factors, it gets quite a bad rep. So if you were only to read about Govanhill in some of the mainstream newspapers and tabloids in particular, you might kind of think it was this kind of this hellhole, dangerous place that you'd never want to visit, and it's full of crime and terrible things happening. And I moved to Govanhill in 2018 and found the opposite to be true. I found this really warm and welcoming community that was full of kind of vibrancy and things happening, and loads of people, really inspiring people and projects sort of trying to make a difference. And that's what sort of set off the idea in my mind for launching a magazine. I'm a journalist and I've got a background in magazines. And I wanted to show people the real Govan Hill, I guess. I wanted to challenge those negative stereotypes that often can be quite closely linked to xenophobia and racism, and to provide a platform to enable people to tell their own story in their own words, rather than having their stories sort of told about them all the time. So I spent 2019 talking to lots of organisations and kind of building this idea, I guess. I was fortunate enough to get a place on the Melting Pot's Good Ideas Incubator, which enabled me to sort of have that space to kind of work out how I would go about launching it as a social enterprise, which was always going to be my idea, to have it as a non-profit. So with 2019's kind of research and conversations and things under the belt, I set off in 2020 with big ideas of launching the magazine as a print magazine in May. I'm just going to share my screen. Oh no, hang on, I think I need to be given permission to share my screen. Matt, if you're able to. Okay, I'll share my screen in a moment. But I began the process of launching the magazine with a survey. So I wanted to really gather in people's thoughts and ideas. So I launched a survey online, first of all, just asking people what sort of stories that they'd like to see covered, what kind of thing they'd like from a magazine like this, and just trying to get as many different thoughts and input as possible. I'm still trying to share my screen, but I'm still waiting just to be made a co-host, I think. Okay, I'm now the co-host. Thank you very much for that. So I'm just gonna, just share my screen so it's not just my face talking at you, because I think I'd get bored of that. So this was the survey that we launched initially was just to gather people's thoughts, and we started to gather some quite interesting stories, so things that people wanted to be covered. So there's a few that we showed in this video, things like the history of Govan Hill. So it wasn't necessarily going to be sort of straight news magazines, things about diversity, challenges to these kind of social media myths. Again, more kind of meta history, things celebrating the different cultures of the areas. And so we had this idea that it wasn't that people wanted to see positive news stories, but also news that tackled, I guess, some of the issues that affected the area. But I was very keen from the beginning that it was always going to be done so in a kind of solutions-focused way. So we weren't just going to add to the kind of negativity, but if we were going to talk about things like rubbish or housing, which is an issue, we were going to talk about the solutions. So I set about with the idea of a solutions-focused magazine, and in January and February of last year, we had some drop-in events where I got all these things that people shared in an online survey. I asked people just tell me what they thought, to select the stories that they liked the best. And with that, the kind of magazine, because it was kind of underway. Now that was in February last year, and obviously the pandemic happened. And so that kind of put everything on hold. The funding I'd applied for to launch the magazine was all put on hold. And I didn't feel like the right time to launch a crowdfunder to start something new. So instead, during that time, I did launch the website, and I hadn't planned on launching the website until the magazine itself was launched. But I was seeing all these stories being shared on social media, and I just thought it was a nice opportunity to capture and preserve some of those stories, but also to kind of share useful stuff. So this is the very first story that I published on the website, was the delivery service. Delivery services available in Govan Hill. So which shops were delivering to people when they were stuck at home. Things about the window art that was being shared, the food banks that were doing such amazing efforts, the teachers that were going out of their way to deliver food to people's homes, how the Muslim community was working to use their networks to share resources, and how people were sort of staying connected, even though other sort of normal ways weren't possible. So the website launched in March, and actually, although I hadn't planned it that way, it was a really nice opportunity to start building viewers and readers, and to start getting a social media following. And so I continued to publish stories, throughout the year. I also had a baby in May, which slowed things down slightly. Until September of last year, when I decided it was the right time to launch a crowdfunder. And I wanted to launch a crowdfunder as a way of generating income for printing the first issue, but also as a way of creating a bit of buzz around the magazine, and sort of finding out whether people were willing to support the project and willing to do so financially, I guess. So we launched the crowdfunder in September and were successful in raising, say, just over £3,000. And it was a really affirming step, which showed me that people were willing to support it and they were willing to sort of put their hands in their pocket for it. There's a little video here I'll show you, which gives you a little flavour of Govan Hill. Can you hear the sound of that?
What do you think is great about Govan Hill?
You can read the subtitles if not.
Colourful power, energy. I love Govan.
I like Govan Hill. I can't really help liking it. I just like it. I worked here for over 10 years and grew up, went to school here as well. So basically, it's a good wee area. It's got its problems like anywhere else, but it's a nice, thriving, eclectic area.
The diversity, there's so much community and everyone just helps each other. That's what's great. There's lots of parks nearby for walking the little one. There's lots of nice places to go and eat in the area. There seems to be new places opening almost every week. There's a big mix of people. Yeah, I just really enjoyed living here for the past 10 years or so. So actually I'm new to this place, so I'm not sure.
Well, from what you've seen so far?
The people here are great, and like it's always crowded when compared to other places, and that's all.
I just like it's being busy. I like busy neighborhoods, and it's always seems to be very lively.
Too many different races, which makes it good.
So that was the video we shared with the crowdfunder. And I was looking at this earlier, and what I was talking about earlier, how people run down the neighborhood, it's very obvious when you scroll beneath the line, which you should sometimes never do, but there's always kind of racist comments and people saying it's a bomb site, it's full of traffickers and squalor and filthy, it's a no-go area. And that's how people still describe Govan Hill, despite the reality being so vastly different. And again, that's what kind of spurred the idea of the magazine. So as I say, the crowdfunder was successful. So we were able to launch the first issue in December. The first issue, there was, we had about 50 different people contribute to the first issue, and we had articles in 8 different languages because reflecting the kind of multicultural nature of the neighbourhood and the fact that we want it to be inclusive to people who didn't have English as a first language. There's a little video of me flicking through it here. We had articles on history, on the Roma culture, on well-being, on new galleries, on what it was like growing up in the neighbourhood, on bartering culture, on Black Lives Matter murals, on cycling, a new cycle path in the area. We had recipes, we had profiles, we had news in brief. So yeah, a whole host of a range of different kind of articles. And we published 5,000 copies, which were distributed around the neighbourhood for free. So we had various volunteers, basically it's taking them out to shops and cafes and hairdressers and restaurants, and anywhere that were taken. Unfortunately, it came out in December and we immediately went into a lockdown, so it kind of made distributing harder than I thought it was going to be for the first issue at least. We also worked with various food banks and community projects who were supporting people who were kind of isolated or more vulnerable in different ways, and so we made sure that it got out into their hands as well. So that was in December last year. We ran a survey afterwards. So I do a survey after each magazine just to gather feedback, and got loads of positive responses. Lots of people said that it really helped them to feel connected to others, even though they might be stuck at home, and they felt like they maybe understood their neighbours better, or they felt like they knew about community groups that they didn't know about before, or they learned something new about the neighbourhood despite living there for the past 30 years. So there's lots of positive feedback, which was kind of, again, quite reassuring. It made me think that we were on the right track. Just before Richard was talking about the membership scheme, I wish that we'd launched a membership scheme earlier. I didn't actually launch a membership scheme until I think January of this year. And that was initially just done on our website, on the Squarespace kind of commerce app. And then we moved to Steady. So we also use Steady, which is a platform which I found to be really useful. Again, I'll share my screen just to show you how we advertise that. So yeah, we basically say that you can become a member. There's almost the benefits that members have. They get the magazine sent to their homes, always with a bit of extra merchandise. So we've had tote bags, we've had coasters, we've had stickers, but that's the kind of the main actual kind of added value that members get. The rest of the way that I sort of sell the membership is to say that you're by supporting the magazine with whatever you can afford, £3 or £5 or £10 a month, you're supporting, you're enabling the magazine to remain free for everyone. And so for people that can't afford that £3 a month, you're ensuring that they get the magazine as well, because I always want the magazine to be free for everyone, no matter what, and to try and be as inclusive as possible. So we launched a membership scheme back in January, and it's been growing steadily. We recently had a big push, so throughout the month of August we kind of had a big campaign where we did various posts and newsletters and videos, and we had a sort of special header on the website about it. And we now have a little over 100 members. So we got 60 new signups in August alone, which shows, again, the kind of difference that when you actually start telling people why you need people to sign up and what difference their money will make, how that really actually gets people to sign up. So we said, what we'd like to do next with the money, if we get enough supporters. We want to, we currently have a quarterly print run, and we want to move to bi-monthly. We want to take on extra staff. We currently have an office space 1 day a week. We want to move that to 5 days a week. We want to be able to provide skills training workshops and to make sure we sort of pay contributors properly. And so these are some of the reasons why people sign up. And yeah, we've had lots of new members sign up in the past month or so. So once the first magazine was out of the way, we have since had issues 2 and 3 come out. This was issue 3, which is just the last one. Issue 4 is being printed as we speak. It'll be out on Thursday or Friday of this week. And while the first magazine was paid for through the crowdfunder, the subsequent magazines have been paid for through advertising, and that advertising revenue comes mostly from local independent businesses. So here you can see there's an advert from a local gallery, a lot of social enterprises and community groups. There was an immigration lawyer here who advertised, she's being slow. We haven't yet launched any digital advertising. That is the next step. But because we kind of see ourselves really as a kind of print first publication, our we're still sort of working on building up our readers and kind of viewers of the website to make sure that we have something that's really kind of worth offering advertisers. We do publish all the stories that we have from the magazine on the website, and we do publish new stories as well. We also have a community notice board where we share local events that are happening. And we also allow community groups to share their notices. Again, currently that's a kind of a free service that we offer to people, but we will hopefully be able to start charging for that at some point. But currently the magazine is funded through advertising, through our membership revenue, and then also through grant funds. So I have a little, we try and be as transparent as possible. So I have an about page on the website, which kind of explains who we are and that kind of thing. And we have the story of Greater Govan Hill on there. So I can sort of take you through that. So as I say, this was the last year, we got some grant funding from startup grant funding from the School of Social Entrepreneurs and First Port, which funds social enterprises in Scotland. And that was all the things to get set up as a business and as a social enterprise and cover things like insurance and accountants and that kind of thing. We also have received some funding for particular events and training. So we've received some money from the lottery to run journalism skills training workshops for young people for underrepresented backgrounds. We've also received funding from the Glasgow Winter Social Wellbeing Fund to host an event, the Glasgow Language Festival that we were part of. And we received funding from another organisation to run radio production training workshops. So as you can see, as well as just having the magazine and website, we try and do other stuff. And I think, again, what Richard was talking earlier about was what you can offer that's different. And we're not trying to compete with the Glasgow Times or Glasgow Live or any of these newsrooms that have the ability to sort of share breaking news stories and to be, you know, the first ones on the scene and to have a newsroom able to kind of cover everything that's happening. We can't do that. It's me and it's currently me and one other person that's in the that both work part-time, and then we have a lot of people that volunteer as well. So we can't do that. What we can do is publish a magazine that's a quality magazine that people really like to read, but we could also add other value to the community. So we produce a monthly radio show on a local community radio station. We've had a couple of events. As I say, there was one that was part of the Glasgow Language Festival when we paired up people with different mother tongues online on Zoom, just to have a one-on-one conversation with someone completely new from a different background, and just to see what connections were made and what kind of shared culture there was. And that was a really lovely event. We got a lot of positive feedback about that. More recently, we had a live version of the magazine, and I can show you another little video here. This was just a few weeks ago. And the next issue is all about climate change. Obviously, living in Glasgow, COP26 is a big factor in what's going to be happening. So the next magazine will focus on climate change, and we held an event that was also talking about climate change, where we tried to recreate the feeling of flicking through the magazine on a Sunday morning. So we had some music, we had poetry, we had panel discussions, we had history talks, we had an introduction to different community campaigns that were happening, and we had coffee for sale. So it was a really lovely event. It didn't rain, which was quite nice. And again, lots of people said that they really enjoyed being part of that, and just coming out and having those conversations and talking about some big issues was a really useful tool. So that's something we'd like to start doing on a regular basis, maybe every month or every other month, and just to sort of try and help build our community, which also then, you know, inspires people to become members. It raises our profile in the community, which then generates further advertising. So as well as being something that brings people together, it's also something that, you know, helps to drive up our kind of revenue as well. So that event was just last month. In terms of other kind of other sort of things we had along the way, we received the Kickstart grant, some people might know, which is a grant which enables you to employ someone who's currently on universal credit, age 16 to 24. So we've taken on one kind of trainee journalist using that scheme, and we're about to take on someone else, or we're advertising for someone else at the moment. And that's meant that the newsroom has kind of changed from just being me to being 2 other people, and we'll be actually advertising for a new role in October as well. So we're going to go from 1 person to 4 people, which is going to be a huge difference. In terms of the actual magazine content itself, the majority of it is produced by people who aren't journalists, and that was very much a kind of leading idea behind the magazine, was to enable people to tell their own stories in their own words. And so we support people to write something, and whether that means, you know, having that conversation and writing it up for them and then going over it with them, or whether it means letting them write it in their own kind of mother tongue language and then just having it translated. But we provide whatever support is needed, and we try and get a real mix of different kind of languages and cultures and different people in each magazine. So yeah, so in each magazine there's about 50 or 60 different people who take part of all ages. We've had the youngest contributors, I think it was 12, and the oldest was 89. And as well as kind of carrying out surveys on our readers, which we do after each magazine, we also carry out regular surveys for people that contribute. And we've had, again, lots of positive stories of people sort of saying that it kind of has helped them feel more confident, or it's helped them get a job, or it's helped them connect to other people in the community when they might have been feeling a bit isolated. So yes, we've been having a really positive feedback from them as well. We've also have regular meetings on Zoom. So we started at the beginning of this year. So we have on a Saturday morning, we have a monthly Zoom chat. And we invite all our members and all our contributors, or anyone that's kind of showing an interest in contributing in the future. It's really kind of open to anyone to come along. And usually that's a chance for me to sort of let people know what's going on behind the scenes of the magazine and what's coming up and ways people can get involved. But it's also an opportunity to discuss some of the big issues. So that's been a really nice kind of platform, I guess, for discussion, and a quite open forum for discussion. So when we've had issues, so the last issue was all about food, or the previous issue was all about issues around rubbish and waste disposal. And so before the magazine sort of came to fruition, we have these kind of open chats where people just come along and just have a discussion about those issues, and then from that lots of ideas start to form, or maybe partnerships start to be made between an illustrator and a writer, or a photographer there who gets an idea to work on something. And so, as well as kind of feeding into the content of the magazine, it's a way for people to feel that they are part of something. You know, is that what do you offer to members? And that's part of what we offer to members, as a chance to be part of the kind of decision-making process. I'm always asking for feedback. If I get an idea for an event or something, I always want people to let me know. And some of the best ideas have come out of those meetings. So, for example, in the last issue, which was a food issue, we decided to make a pull-out poster in the middle of the magazine, which is all about foraging in the local park. And that came out of one of the meetings. You know, I wouldn't have had that idea myself. So there's loads of kind of great ideas that you get from kind of opening up that kind of editorial process as well. We also, as I say, have a monthly radio show, and that's on a local community radio station, and that's also run entirely by volunteers. So we have about 10 or 15 people that are kind of regular members of that group. And we sort of, again, try and recreate the magazine. So there's a whole host of different sort of snippets and stories and packages and interviews and music. And then the other thing that we do, that we're about to start doing, is this training. So I wanted to kind of part of what I want to do is help to kind of diversify the media. You know, we all know about the problems of diversity within our media. And I think within the magazine, we are able to showcase a whole range of different voices that you wouldn't necessarily normally hear in the media. So the next step for that is to start actually kind of opening up journalism and journalism careers and journalism skills, so other people feel that whether they might have previously not seen themselves represented in the media and not felt engaged with that media, they can now start to feel part of it. So we're going to have a journalism skills training program, an 8-week thing for young people from underrepresented backgrounds to teach them some skills, you know, to let them explore some stories, to make some videos and do some radio workshops. But by doing that, we hope, you know, we might also, you know, open up the idea that working in journalism might be for other people that hadn't previously considered it. And, you know, once they also are trained up, they'll also be able to feed into the magazine more. So it kind of, again, helps to create this sort of snowball effect. So yes, I think that's kind of, you know, that's Greater Gibbon Hill in a nutshell, I guess, and that's the story of Greater Gibbon Hill so far. I think I'll leave it there, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thanks so much, Rhiannon. That was really interesting and some great ideas in terms of engagement. I love the real life magazine on a Sunday morning being played out in real life. That's one I've written down for me, and I'm going to nick that. That's a really good idea. We do have some questions. So Daryl Chamberlain says, "Hi Rhiannon, I think what you're doing is brilliant. Could I ask how many people live in the Govan Hill patch? And what the rest of the local media scene is like? Does the Glasgow Times, etc., still do the routine council meeting stuff?"
Yeah, so it's hard to actually get numbers of how many people live in Govan Hill. I see different numbers bandied around quite a lot. I think around 15,000. Some people say 18,000. So again, it is a very, it's only like 13 blocks, I think, but it's very densely populated. People live in tenements in Glasgow, so you have a lot of people kind of stacked on top of each other. In terms of local media scene, we have the Glasgow Times who do council stuff. They have a journalist who lives in Govan Hill, and she's actually a really good journalist, and she does some really great stories as well. So we're not the only organisation writing about Govan Hill and doing it in a positive way. But yet equally, you know, you also see negative stories. You know, that's the nature of a newspaper. They're going to share positives and negatives, but you tend to see kind of more negative stories in some of the kind of, you know, the tabloids. You know, things like the Scottish Sun have had some really awful stories about the Roma community in Govan Hill, and people really feel sort of scapegoated and targeted by it. And there was a big meeting before I even had the idea for the magazine held in Govan Hill about the way that the media portrays Govan Hill. And so many people just think, like, not everyone always realise, especially if you don't have English as a first language, what people are saying. And then when people started to realise what was being said about them and their community, it was really kind of heartbreaking to see that kind of realisation that people were being demonised in this way. So we have this problem whereby, and I'm not saying that we only focus on positive, rosy, happy things. We talk about issues, but we just don't do it in a way that demonises anyone, or in a way that just focuses on the negative. So when we talk about rubbish problem, we talk about what people are doing about it and what could be done about it. And we've also done a sort of, you know, solutions focused take where we look at what works elsewhere. So we created this this map where we looked at, you know, similar cities with similar problems and show different solutions that other people are using. So we try and do something a bit different, and that's how we add value, and that's how we do something that the other media aren't doing, I guess.
Right stuff. Next question from John Cook. How difficult was it to host the outdoor event? It looks like a lot of equipment, need for camera person, insurances, etc. So quite expensive?
No, it didn't cost a thing. So the outdoor event was held as part of the Govan Hill International Festival and Carnival, which is a sort of week-long celebration that happens around Govan Hill. We held it in it was a disused street that was closed off, but it wasn't us that did it. So another organisation, the Glasgow Artist Moving Image Studio, had closed off that street for a week of screenings and events that they were already holding. So I got in touch with them and said, could we come and use this space? The camera person was someone on their mobile phone. It was edited together by a friend afterwards, so we didn't actually have a camera person there. There was a microphone and speaker all set up, but because the organisation that were already hosting events there had that in place, and they had funding to have that in place, it didn't cost anything to host it. We had about 60 people come along, and I said it was free, but you can make a donation. So I think we raised about £70 from it or something. So yeah, it wasn't a huge earner, but it was a start just to sort of build on, basically.
Cool, excellent. Well, I think that's it in terms of questions. Matt, do you have anything to add?
I did have one question, if I could, Rhiannon, just a practical one, really. What are because the magazine itself is it's full colour, it's such a lovely looking magazine. I just wanted to kind of know what the costs involved in producing a magazine like that are.
Sure.
Logistically.
Yeah. So yeah, as you say, the magazine is very much like the high design and high sort of good quality photography is a big part of it, and we wanted to create something that was built to last, but also that would make people feel really proud that they had something that showcased their neighborhood in such a way, but also look so good. And people tell us in it that they love showing it to friends or neighbors, or sending it to relatives that no longer live in the area. So in terms of the actual print costs, I think our print cost for 4,000 copies is 2,200, I think. And then the design costs, it's about 1,500 per issue. So yeah, the costs are quite high, but I guess the idea is that the advertising so far has covered those costs for each issue. And that's, we have, in my mind, it's not necessarily laid out like this, but in my mind, the advertising for each issue should cover the production costs for each issue. Then we have the membership fees, which come in, on a monthly basis, which help to sort of provide a sort of general income. We have the grant funding, which provides funding for sort of specific projects that go alongside stuff. So yeah, it pays for itself at the moment. It's not, we don't have much left over after the magazine is printed, but the idea is that we're going to have. So far, it's just been me trying to generate advertising, and we're about to hire someone to sort of take care of that officially. So someone will be able to do a better job and also kind of increase our revenue from that, I guess.
And one more question. You mentioned that the first issue had contributors from 40 different nationalities, did you say? Was it?
No, we had 50 contributors from 12 nationalities in the first issue, and it's about the same in each issue from then on, I think.
And how many different languages were actually in the issue?
So there was 8 languages in issue 1, and then there's been about 6 or 7 languages in each issue so far.
How do you go about editing that?
Wow, we learned a lot from issue 1. In issue 1, we had articles in Arabic and Urdu, and I found someone to translate it, I found someone to proofread it, and that was all fine. But what we didn't know was when we then copied and pasted it into InDesign, it actually messed up the formatting. So we printed this is in Arabic, but actually, which is a Pakistani, no, it's in Urdu, sorry, a Pakistani food guide to Govan Hill. But apparently it's completely illegible. You can't read it. It's sort of, it runs backwards, and the text is all spread up. And the same with the Arabic, which we published in this like a well-being guide. So that was a big learning from issue 1. Obviously, I thought I'd done everything right by getting it translated and proofread, but I hadn't checked it once it was in the design. Since then, we've learned how to format it correctly within the design, but we didn't know that before. So yeah, that was a big learning curve. In terms of editing, I just have to trust my translators and proofreaders. I mean, for all I know, it could be saying something completely different, but we work with people that we know. So so far it's been okay.
And what's the feedback been like from the communities that are being represented?
Yeah, really lovely. Lots of people from both sides, and people that speak those languages were really surprised to see something in their language, and to take it home and maybe show their granny, who was able to read something who perhaps couldn't read it in English. So there's been that, and people really feel, I guess, pleased to see their own language in there. But there's also people who are English speaking who don't speak those languages who love to see it. Actually, lots of people comment that in the feedback, that they love to see the articles in different languages, and that was a big part of it, was to kind of stop this kind of othering of different languages, really accept the fact we have 88 different languages spoken in Govan Hill, and that's amazing. And actually, we often, if you live in an English speaking family and if you have English speaking friends, you might not be exposed to those languages. So by putting them side by side, we're just to normalise the fact there's other languages a part of our culture and part of our community, and actually that's worth celebrating. And the next step I want to do, which I haven't done yet, is to have like a little translation box in each translated article, so you can have like 5 or 6 keywords, and then you can start to sort of, you're not going to learn the language, but you can start to pick something out and start to recognise some different things. And you put those articles, those articles online as well? As they are. Yeah. So all the articles from the magazine go online. Within the idea of the magazine as well, it's all kind of evergreen content. It's all I guess what you might call slow journalism. So it's all most of it is not time sensitive. So it goes online over the next 3 months after the magazine is published, and we put kind of regular kind of news stories online as well. We have a deal with a platform called SpeechKit, who turn written articles into audio files. And I'm just wondering, just thinking on top of my head now, I wonder if they could translate from Urdu into the English language, perhaps, and put a digital file above the file, so you can have that. I don't know. Yeah, that would be nice. We haven't started doing audio transcriptions of our articles yet, but that would be a nice additional thing to have. It's a sort of thing we have had some foreign language poems and songs in our radio show, which has been really nice to include as well. Great. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. That's enough of me prattling on, asking questions. John?
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Rhiannon. Really interesting and some great approaches there to community engagement. Hi all, I hope you had a good break, and welcome back. So we're on the last stretch. We've got Act 8, and that's followed by a skills session with 4 of our ICNN members. And we've after that we've got an open chat online for anybody who wants to discuss some of the learning points from today. But in the meantime, I'd like to welcome Dominic Young, who is the founder and CEO of Act 8, which provides tools for publishers to generate reader revenue with fewer barriers and walls. I won't say any more. I'll hand you over to Dominic so he can tell you more. Dominic.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I've been very distracted the last few weeks because Act 8 is launching its first ever crowdfunding, which launches today, but I found myself absolutely glued to this conference, and people like Rhiannon and Richard are absolutely the people I wish I could spend my time talking to, because I spend a huge amount of my time talking to national newspapers, huge media groups. And the spirit of experimentation, just trying things, understanding the needs of the community and getting on with it is something that is sadly lacking, I think, in quite a lot of them. And what I'm hearing here is just inspiring. So what I thought I would do is tell you all a little bit of the Act 8 story, and then explain why I think it's relevant to everything you guys are thinking about and doing. And it all starts way back in the midst of time when I was working at News International more than 10 years ago now, when I was head of strategy, and I was thinking about future business models. And it was clear to me that advertising on its own wouldn't be enough. And I think what we've been hearing today and what we've been seeing for the last 20 years tells us that that's true. But also that subscription in particular wouldn't be enough either, because most people are quite promiscuous with their news consumption, and they're not committed enough very often to even one, but certainly more than one title to make an ongoing commitment to it. And so Act 8 was my response to that. I saw how we could do better, and I also thought I could see how to actually get it done. And I figured instead of just talking about it, which is what you do when you're head of strategy, I would have a go at doing it, which is why I developed Axate. So as is traditional, I'm going to share my screen, do a little bit of a PowerPoint thing, because that's also traditional. Yeah, I thought this would amuse Richard. I thought I'd start off with a couple of things I've learned, largely actually recently, because I've been talking to all these nationals and these international brands, and they've all come off the end of a subscription surge during COVID, and they're scratching their heads wondering what to do next. But one thing I've observed about the people doing new things in news are everybody is focused on doing less better in various ways. People talk about Tortoise, for example, is not trying to be a news product. It's trying to be quite focused. I don't know if you know a chap called Will Lewis, who used to run Dow Jones. He's working on a project that's still under wraps that does something similar. And actually, local and hyperlocal sites are, when they're done well, absolutely serving the needs of a local community, doing what that community needs, and not trying to do dozens and hundreds of other things as well, which are well served by other people. And it's just interesting that anybody who's trying to do something really interesting seems to be, in different ways, arriving at the same conclusion. They need more focus. And that's linked to really the founding idea of Axate, which is that what the news industry needs, and in fact the media needs more broadly, is not just lower barriers to consumer payment. I think if you accept it's essential that the option of having consumer payment is kind of available and is widespread within the market, that's all very well. But actually what we also need is a network, because the news industry collectively speaks to everybody, but we think of our relationships with users as if they are separate and disconnected, and we have to persuade each user to make a separate, different relationship with each of us, which is creating a massive barrier in this world of casual consumption. We're putting too many barriers in the way, not just cost, but the nature of forming these relationships requires far too much formality. And when you talk to even successful subscription publishers, they talk longingly about the day when they might have converted 2 or 3% of their audience to subscription. They have to leave behind 90-something% of the people they talk to in order to try to make money from 2 or 3%. If those 93% became more and more available as customers, and we weren't competing for them, there wasn't a fixed amount of money they were worth, it would unlock an awful lot of value, which is why I built Axate. And that's, I mean, although it's essentially a really small paywall, if you implement it as a standalone thing on one site, it's a way of paying with a much lower level of commitment. Really, what we're about is enabling a network, and that's the thing I want to focus on a little bit. So yes, easy question. What is it? Can someone scream and shout if they can't see the Maidenhead advertiser on the screen? Otherwise, I'll assume that you can, and that the technology is doing what I was hoping. What Axate is a payment mechanic which publishers can implement to suit themselves in whatever way makes sense. So here we are on the Maidenhead advertiser. Here's Axate. Axate is a wallet. So the user prepays a little bit of money into their wallet, in this case £4.30, quite a lot of money because I was demonstrating it to somebody else before. And that money can be deducted from that wallet when and if the user decides they want to spend some money. So here I am on the Maidenhead advertiser. They're just charging 20 pence per day to be the Maidenhead advertiser. So I accidentally clicked on that ad there, which I didn't want to do. So if I turn up and read the Maidenhead advertiser, it'll cost me 20p. I will not be interrupted and asked if I want to pay. Choose that, but because I like the Maidenhead advertiser and I'm not worried about spending 20p, I choose not to. In other words, it just automatically takes my money whenever I go to Maidenhead advertiser and read a paid article. Some publishers do what Maidenhead's done, which is they're charging per day. Some publishers charge per article, but with a cap, so 20 pence to read an article, maximum 60p a day, say, or whatever. We've had some publishers go as high as £1 an article, £2 a day. The other really important point, and this is sort of part of the network thinking, is that this wallet travels with me. So I've now gone to Cornwall Reports, which is a hyperlocal site in Cornwall. I've been a user of Axate for a while. Here I am. The wallets come with me. The logins come with me. The money's come with me. I haven't had to do anything here to be effectively a logged in user ready to spend money. You can see here that the pricing is different. It's 20 pence per article, maximum £1 a week. So if you've read 5 articles across a week, you then have unlimited access until the anniversary of when you started that week. Something else you might notice here, there is a subscription option. Everybody wants subscribers. We know a percentage of users will become subscribers. And if you can minimize the effort and hassle associated with becoming a subscriber, you can get people through that dread word funnel a lot more easily, or just taking away a lot more of the points at which they drop out. So if I want to become a Cornwall Report subscriber, obviously Axate already has payment details, so I can just call up the modal that says, yes, I want to be a subscriber, and that's it. After that, I will become a subscriber. I will not need to pay additionally at all when I visit this site, and when I refresh the page, it'll say I'm a subscriber. I can also turn that off anytime I like using the switch on the back of the wallet. I can become an unsubscriber just as easily as I can subscribe, which is really, really important. One of the reasons people don't like subscriptions is because people make it difficult to unsubscribe, or they forget and they find themselves paying for things unintentionally. I make this point merely because Axate is built around the premise that the pricing and the nature of the relationship that different publications want to have with their audience, what will suit the audience, varies. There is no one approach that is the right approach for everybody. But if we can enable a flexible set of payment mechanics, and if we can enable a network, in other words, every user signed up is a potential customer of every publisher who has signed up, that's how we can cause the activity to start to snowball. And the incentives within Axate are not just to not block that. In other words, when somebody moves from Maidenhead Advertiser to Cornwall Reports, nobody loses anything. That's just more money being made. There's some positive incentives within our business model that actually encourage publishers to send users around, which is kind of important, because if you're a very specialist focused publication of any kind, you know that you're not going to be delivering all the interests of your users. If you know that some of your users may well be interested in something you don't focus on yourselves, but you have friends who do, sending them over to those friends, giving the user a journey which takes them through a range of things they want and are interested in, is useful for the user and generates more money for both publishers. And so if we can start to enable a network between publishers and users, we can start to redefine some of the economic incentives which have made the internet really rather a poisonous place for users. I often reflect that it's a bit ironic, to be honest, that most publishers have adopted one of two business models, both of which at their heart are a bit hostile to users when you think about it. Advertising, especially when done to excess, which we see on an awful lot of free websites, is so annoying that people will actually take active steps to try to get rid of it. It's not just that they can ignore it, it's a thing they choose not to pay attention to. It's a thing that they need to make it get out of the way so they can consume the actual content, the quality of which often on those sites is not all that it could be. Or alternatively, you have subscription sites with paywalls that, using a variety of different mechanisms, lock you out just when you're really getting interested in the product, and they sort of slam the door and say, sorry, you've got to sign up, make a commitment to pay us every month. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with either of those models, but when those are the only two models in the market, we end up seeing these products evolve kind of in this polarized way. And I say we're missing an awful lot of the market, and we're failing to meet the needs of an awful lot of users. So when I speak to anybody who's in the business of innovating, understanding the needs of a very specific user base, and trying their best to create a product and a business model that serves that and becomes sustainable, I just think, hallelujah, it's an essential need for society, actually, and no more ever than at the local area level, where in many societies, in many communities, there's a local news provider or none. There's not a whole plethora of commoditized providers all competing to bring you their clickbait stories about someone's cellulite. So it's not that this is meant to be a big Axate pitch, but I just want to emphasize the point. Axate is not trying to promote a particular ideology about who should pay, how much they should pay, the mechanism they should use. You can see here that we're offering 3 things at the moment. One is pay as you go. When you turn up, you just pay the thing I just showed you. Second one is subscriptions. Click to subscribe. Third one is contributions. I like this publication. I want to make a one-off contribution. All of these built at the request of publishers. The pay-as-you-go network is certainly our kind of core hero product and the founding idea of Axate. Subscriptions and contributions we've built to enable something for publishers and readers and take away friction. So why force someone through, as Richard was saying earlier, a second sign-up process for the convenience of switching platforms or whatever? Why not just try to keep it to one simple paying relationship and remove every single point you possibly can that creates friction, which in turn will create people dropping out and not engaging. And to that end, not that we publish this on our website right now, but I mention to you all because it will be interesting. Axate's business model is revenue share. We take a share of the money we generate on these pay-as-you-go transactions. We do not take a share of the money we generate on subscriptions or contributions, other than the transaction charges from the payment provider, because we don't think we're adding anything there other than convenience for the user, which is great. But if we're trying to take a cost for Axate from a relationship that publishers probably could form with those users anyway, all we're doing is creating cost, which is entirely not the point. The point of what we're doing is to create opportunity and open up parts of the market that are currently closed. Also to the point that Richard made and Rhiannon, experimentation is absolutely the way to understand and get to grips with something like Axate. We've had publishers who've been on there for a couple of years. We've had publishers who've been on there for a few months. We have publishers who've built themselves up to hundreds and thousands of wallet holders, even for small local sites. We have others who are just beginning their journey. They're on tens. Some of them are just beginning to convert people to subscription. Some people aren't offering subscription at all. The ability to experiment, the ability to explain clearly to readers what it is you're doing and why, to experiment with what content you're charging for, what you're not, and everything else, is absolutely key to helping the new paradigms emerge. So this is our little drawing about the network. We use this when we're talking to investors and publishers. There's a gap that is currently unbridged. It's all the green parts of this diagram, in between the free internet funded by advertising, which is absolutely crammed full of stuff, but it's too hard to find the stuff that's really good, and subscription, which is fantastic for people who have a close relationship. And for subscription, also read membership, by the way, recurring payment in return for special status and unlimited access. It's fantastic, and everyone will have a portion of their audience who are dedicated enough to their brand and to their relationship with their brand that they want to be on that level. But if we can put something in between, and if we can put the publishers in control of that, and especially if we can give them ways of working together to increase the sort of universe of available customers to help cross-promote to people who might be interested across publications, and to have mutual benefit when that happens, then I think we're solving a problem which can operate at quite a large scale. Back to the big nationals, the big monolithic publishers. They are important because they do have big audiences, and obviously we spend our time talking to them a lot, and we're optimistic that we're going to start to see 1 or 2 very big names join Axate. That'll be great, because what they will do is deliver a large audience of people with wallets, which is fantastic, because then all they need to do is drift in the direction of any other site that also has Axate, and that site can acquire them with virtually no formalities at all, which is wonderful. But I think the innovation, the people rethinking the products, the people saying, actually, should our future product be in the image of our previous one? Do we need these great big monolithic mega sites? I think that's going to happen elsewhere. And I think every innovative company we talk to is small, is hungry for something they really believe in, and are determined to make it happen. And so I think the combination of the two is what's going to unlock potentially a very substantial market. And by the way, we also talk to people like TV companies who are scratching their heads wondering how they're ever going to out Netflix. Just to make the point about casual payments, which is what we call them, it's not really about the size of the payment, it's the nature of the interaction, which ought to be with the product, not with the payment process. The gap in the middle between subscriptions, low volume but very high marginal value, and ads, high volume but very low and falling marginal value, is this great big gap that we think is the opportunity for us, for the industry. And we've definitely built this as something that we think of as something of the media industry. It's not a tech platform coming to interact with people. It is trying to come up with a solution from within the industry that has mutual benefit embedded within it. Obviously, casual payments have some strengths versus both subscriptions and ads in terms of the proportion of the audience they can potentially reach. The fact that taking away the demand for commitment takes away one of the biggest barriers to converting people, and the fact that users only have to go through this sign up conversion journey once ever, and having got their wallet, they can then use it everywhere. Obviously, it snowballs. The more users there are, the more publishers will want to be on board to try to serve them. The more publishers there are, the more users there will be available, and so on. Try to take the viral tricks that the internet has played largely to our damage, and use them in a positive way to create and grow a network of users and publishers that traps the value created within the media sector, because it's delivering user needs in return for user money. Really straightforward relationship that we can all understand. Subscriptions and advertising, we know the flaws with those. I think the other really important point to make, and this, I think you probably all know this actually, but I do speak to publishers, quite big publishers, who say to me, honestly, they say without embarrassment almost, no one will pay, the product's not worth paying for. Now, firstly, I think that might be true if what they're talking about is subscription. There are plenty of products out there in the market that just have never lent themselves to subscription, never will. They're aimed at a demographic and a price point which is all about spontaneous consumption, frequent habit-driven purchase rather than commitment. And nearly all the really successful subscription publishers are at the high end of the market, targeting affluent readers. But if you don't think your product is worthy of payment, I think you've got a problem. You don't really believe in yourselves. And I think, and every time I look at any of your sites, it's obvious that the relationship between the sites, the people who make them, and the audience is clear. And if you can set the right price, and if you can do it in a way that can address the needs of a much larger proportion of the audience, you can succeed at a scale that is difficult to achieve just with subscriptions, or just with advertising, or just with contributions. Nothing wrong with any of those things, but we need additional options in the market, particularly now when I think it's fair to say, anecdotally, and there's many anecdotes I can tell you, most of the larger subscription sites have hit their plateau. And I think the truth about subscription is it will always hit a plateau, and it's extremely difficult to grow after that happens. And I think a very large proportion of the sites who've been doing well with that have begun to hit that plateau and are now looking for different ways to expand their market, which is obviously good news for Axate, good news for any publishers who join the Axate network. It can work perfectly well as a standalone product, but the magic of this is the network. I'm going to shut up because I see hands going up, and I much prefer talking to people than talking to a camera into the void. I've got no idea if anyone's, well, I know someone's listening because someone put their hand up. So why don't we turn this into a discussion? I've got many more points to make, but I'd be really happy to do it in an interactive kind of way.
Great, thanks, Dominic. That's really interesting. You've got an interesting product there, I think. Yeah, a couple of questions that have kind of come through so far. Daniel Webb posts, could we see a mobile demo? Now that might be difficult for you, but presumably your product translates onto mobile.
Yes, it will be difficult for me because I'm technologically inept. But the easy way of doing it is go to Cornwall Reports or Maidenhead Advertiser or any of those sites and have a look. It's integrated onto their site. It appears in exactly the same way. Try it. Try signing up. Anyone who wants to sign up from this seminar, send me your email address and I will either put some credit into your wallet or I'll refund your transaction, because it would be good for you to try it. And then you'll get a sense of it. You'll get a sense of how easy it is and what the mobile experience is like.
Are you happy for me to put your email address in the chat box, Dominic?
Certainly am. Yes, please. I'd love to hear from anybody. And I should also add, by the way, that a lot of our implementations have been with small local publishers. We found the actual implementation part to be something pretty simple with most of the platforms people are using. I think the quickest we've done it is about half an hour. And the important point that I think will be obvious to this audience, not necessarily to some of the bigger companies, is the day you implement something like Axate is the day you've put a few more tools in your toolbox. It doesn't need to be the day you have a sudden about turn in strategy, you reverse everything you've already done, you unpick whatever good things you're doing. It gives you a few more options and a few more things to play with and experiment with. And because we just do revenue share, we don't charge any fees at all. It's a pretty low risk thing to be doing.
Cool. Okay. So a couple of questions. First one from John Cook. John asks, if a new publisher launches with Axate, how are they able to measure lost readers when the reader chooses not to subscribe or pay as you go and therefore hits the X on their browser?
Most publishers who implement Axate, well, first of all, you can be selective and you can do experiments to see how people will respond to different ways of offering this and where you decide to put the payment, some of which are really interesting. There's one experiment out of Scandinavia where sites leave, not with Axate, but where they leave everything free until a certain time of day and then they make it chargeable later. In other words, they get that early traffic, the morning pickup. Every publisher who implements with Axate chooses which stories are paid and which ones aren't. Doesn't have to be a blanket thing across the site. All of them leave a certain amount of the story readable, so people still go to the page, see something, and hopefully like it enough to want to move on and sign up. Obviously, the sign up barrier, if someone doesn't have a wallet, is much higher than if they do. And we are at the early stages of this, so everyone will need to get people through that. It's an awful lot lower than it would be for a paywall though, because as long as the user understands, it's not a commitment to monthly payments. If you don't read, you don't pay. The actual sign up process is as good as or better than any. But you've got your stats, you've got your logs. You can run A/B tests and try two different things in parallel and see how people respond to it. And we can help you the best we can with analytics and measurement. Anything that we can find out, we'll certainly share.
Right, thanks very much. And the next question is from Graham Breeze. And he asks, Dominic, isn't the dilemma convincing people to pay who have had something for nothing in the past? And with that goes high risk. Yeah, what you're selling is your product. And if what you've got is the product that used to be free now with an added price sticker and you haven't got anything else to tell people is worth paying for, that is most definitely a difficult transition. Ways to begin that transition are, for example, start by asking for contributions, explain to people why it is you want to charge. There is something we implemented, which we did during COVID, which is still available, although not many people are still using it, which is a pay if you can. In other words, they see the blocker, it says sign up to pay, but you can make it go away. There are various ways of doing that, but in the end, you have to have a relationship with your readers, which can convince them of a value proposition. I think that's a lot easier with a local product that people like and trust, with local reporters actually on the ground, than it is with a really huge ad-ridden mega site, which all of a sudden becomes paid. And we can hold people's hands and help them on that journey for sure. We've got quite a lot of experience now. Cool. Does anybody else have any more questions for Dominic? Matt, something.
I was just going to ask how many ICNN members are using Axate at the moment?
I'm not sure, 3 or 4, I think. But actually, I was going to say, there is an opportunity here. you guys are a network. There is an opportunity here to do something together, which we talk to publishers, something larger in other countries, who are keen to find a way of doing something together. Publishers used to be quite good at this. They used to be quite good, for example, at putting their newspapers in the same shops next to each other, and not separating their products apart from each other. And I think if you can form a network, and if you can form a network that is both supportive of each other and increases the opportunity mutually, you can do something really, really, at a larger scale. So we have a few, and my colleague Tristan, who's on the call, will doubtless text me in a second to tell me how many. And I would love to have more, and we will certainly work with anyone. Actually, no, that's not true. We won't work with anyone. We'll work with brands that readers can trust. We'll never be a platform that anybody can launch on. That we will always have an element of gating there, because unless readers can trust us and trust you, that you're not in the business of ripping them off, scamming them, and trying to trick them into spending money, this thing will never work. I think one of the great advantages of payment is nobody will pay twice for something that disappoints them, lets them down, or betrays their trust. There is something inherently about the fact that people are paying that enhances trust and gives a greater credibility to proper, credible news sources. And God knows, at a wider scale, that is a problem that we definitely need to help solve.
Well, thank you, Dominic. I put your email in the chat box, so if anybody does want to get in touch with Dominic, you can either do that directly, or if you want to come through me or John, that's absolutely fine, and we'll pass on your interests to Dominic and Tristan. But thank you.
If you want a wallet, yeah, absolutely, we'll set you one up this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Dominic. That was a really interesting talk. John,
thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm going to demote you now, Dominic, if you don't mind.
Is everybody here for the skills session, Matt?
I think we are one missing, but we can carry on. I think we can go straight into it if
okay,
be a problem.
Real okay. So yeah, thanks Dominic for that. Really interesting product, which I'm sure some members will definitely be interested in. And like I said, I think the theme from today that's coming out very strongly is experimentation on different things. Some things will work for some publications and won't for others, but it's a matter of trying out these different ideas. So the next session that we've got, which we're going to introduce just a quarter of an hour early, is our skills session. So just before I introduce that, just a reminder that we do have an end of day chat, which where we can continue the discussions of today in a breakout room. We'll post a separate link for that towards the end of this session. So if you wanted to kind of continue a chat, that would be absolutely great on some of the points that we've found out today. Back onto this session, the idea came from ICNN member Michael Casey, who thought it would be good for publishers to share skills and ideas that they may have. Matt and I thought this was a great idea, so we have 4 publishers lined up. If you have any skills that you'd like to share or any questions you'd like to ask, please do post in the question area or join the chat. We'll move on to our skills session, and I'll start with because I'm based in Leeds, I'll favour God's own county and the centre of the universe, and I'll start with South Leeds Life and Jeremy, who is got an idea which generates a fair amount of revenue for you, I think, or it generates a fair amount of revenue for South Leeds Life.
Yes. Hi everyone, from a very rainy Leeds. So what I'm going to talk about is a sponsorship approach that we stumbled upon, to be honest, and I'll tell you the story. A bit of background about South Leeds Life. We've been going about 10 years online and about 6 years in print. It's a monthly free tabloid. very much like Rhiannon talking about Govan Hill, where we cover 2 postcodes in the unfashionable end of Leeds, pretty much let down by the legacy media. Most of the stories you get about the area are court reports, and we really set out to balance things up, to tell some good news stories, try and help people find ways of getting involved in the local community, find out what was going on, because we have a very strong community sector in the area, lots of great organisations doing great things. So we managed to launch into print with a grant, which I think is often how people do it. The other thing to say is that my background isn't in journalism, so this is all new to me, and I've picked it up as I've gone along and probably made an awful lot of mistakes. But my background is in community development, and so that influences the way we approach the whole project, particularly the lack of commercial nous. So as I say, we stumbled onto the financing model we've got at the moment. We'd launched with a grant. We had an idea that we'd be able to pick up advertising once we had a physical product that we could show people. But we've never really had someone who was good at actively going out and selling advertising. So whilst we do get a fair amount of advertising, it's mostly public sector, third sector advertising. It's not commercial stuff, unfortunately. We sort of bumbled along with enough money at any one point to fund the next 3 or 4 issues, but not a lot in the bank. And at some point, someone, and it wasn't me, had the genius idea of telling the readers this. And we said, look, you know, if things go badly, then we might have to stop doing the paper every month, but we'll try and carry on with the website. And we got this very unexpected outpouring of love of people saying, well, you can't stop. We really value the newspaper. The newspaper's fantastic. You've got to keep going. And one organisation in particular, who I won't mention, but who were reasonably financially well off, community, not-for-profit, basically opened their checkbook and said, how much do you need? Which was fantastic. And off the back of that, we thought, right, we need to have a properly structured sponsorship scheme. And our first sponsors seem to be at the platinum level, because we can't ask anyone else for this amount of money, but we'll have bronze, silver, gold, and a basic level. And primarily those organisations are third sector organisations. They're community groups, they're charities. We have some schools, organisations like that. And we've developed a package so people get a profile article about the organisation. They get a certain number of free print adverts, depending at what level they've pitched in at. And in terms of the bottom line, that brings in around £6,500 a year at the moment, which is about somewhere between a half and a third of our operating costs. Sorry, it's not a half and a third. It's between I can't do the maths with the pressure of a camera, but it's around a third of our costs. So that's significant. As I say, we do get advertising income. We do have a subscriber scheme, much like other people. It's not as big as it could be. I think it's about 60 people at the moment. And we get a small number of small grants that keep us going, generally for sort of special projects, particular issues. And that's our story, I think, and I've overrun the 5 minutes, so I'll stop there, but obviously I can take questions.
Right, thanks so much, Jeremy. That's great. I just think it's a really kind of innovative funding model that you've got there to kind of work, you know, alongside the existing, you know, third sector organisations. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing that you're doing there. Okay. I don't think we've got any questions directly there. So I will move on to next is Una Murphy from View Digital in Northern Ireland, who's just joined us. So Una, would you like to go next?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm so sorry I'm running a little bit late. I was invited to a launch of a magazine that we actually produced last year before the COVID pandemic about migrant and refugee women, and they decided they'd like it printed and reversioned, and so they invited me along. I'm sorry it clashed with this conference, and apologies for being late again. So business development, my heart's always in journalism, but since I started off View Digital 10 years ago, I co-founded it with Brian Peelan. We developed a magazine and a website, and we found that we really needed to work on our business model to sustain our journalism, which specialises in social affairs in Northern Ireland and beyond. So what I've done is basically take a lot of classes. I've been involved in a European Journalism Centre workshop about revenue raising. I was lucky to get involved in a Google digital news initiative, digital immersion program last year, and this year I've been looking with Google 3FT strategies at like a rapid sprint of trying to develop new products that would encourage more paid subscribers to our magazine, and develop products that might interest them. So I'm also taking part in a UCLAN journalism leadership program at the moment, which I'm finding quite useful as well. So I think it's just been really, we needed someone to focus on the business side, and I was it, and even though I've worked as a series television producer, I've worked as a senior broadcast journalist at the BBC, a reporter for the Daily Mirror, the Irish Times, it was me who had to take on that job. And I think really from our point of view, we really needed someone who, while they're, editorial in every bone of their body, they had to take on that mantle of the business development, the revenue generation, business model canvas. I've done it. I've really had to think about how we develop those revenue streams for every bit of work that we do, and that's a challenge. I mean, we find that we can get sponsorship for individual editions of the magazine, and I think that in between that, you really do need to try to get the core funding so you can develop as a business, you can hire more people to work with you. We really are, intensely interested in bringing new talent in, younger talent as well, to keep the brand going. And, we think it's important what we do. We're very mission driven, and I think that's the difficulty sometimes with the smaller community publications. We know there's a need for this sort of journalism in our community, so we go for it hell for leather, and then we think, oh, okay, well, where do we get the money from? And at some stage, you just have to stop and think, you can't run on empty forever. You do need to put your foot on the table, you do need a roof over your head, and you just have to think, how are the commercial publishers doing it? Are there any ideas that we can pull back from them in terms of the business side? I'm not saying that we all need to become Rupert Murdoch. I definitely don't want to go down that road. I'm not interested in giving shareholders who live in foreign parts lots of extra money, the way traditional journalism has been, set up, but we're a social enterprise, we're a community interest company. So as well as our bank balance, our turnover, we do have to think of the community impact that we're making. But that doesn't mean that we haven't needed to swing back and think of the business development. And I've just done that really by the training courses. And I keep on putting out the one line message to everything is, that's brilliant journalism, where's the revenue coming from? And I think I've become that person who keeps on saying that all the time, which is a bit boring for everyone else, I'm sure. I like to get my teeth into a good story like the best of everyone here. but I've been the one who's got business development put onto their forehead, and I have to think about it all the time. I don't know how everyone else in the panel has answered this question about this business development, because I'm a little bit late into the panel, but I don't know if that's a similar experience that everyone else has had.
Thanks, Una. Yeah, I think it literally just started. We hadn't been going long when you when you joined us, actually. So I think you caught the you know, the back end of what Jeremy was saying. Anything else you want to add to that, Una, or?
I think someone has a comment there, Daniel, who said, I'm rubbish at sales and never attempted to sell advertising. It's where I'm going. It's we obviously are not good at sales either. But what we had to have was the money talk. You know, we actually have to sit down and say, yeah, that's great. Do you have a budget for this? And we have to say to people, that's a fantastic topic, but where are we going to find the sponsorship from it? So we've nearly had to ask everyone, think of the editorial and think who can, and people are increasingly understanding this as a community outlet. We just don't have the resources to do all the stories that we want to do, however good they are in terms of social affairs. And you know, that's a tricky conversation. Money's always tricky. So we've not called it advertising, we've called it sponsored stories. And we will look for 4 sponsored stories per edition of the magazine. And we know that will cover those costs. And then for additional revenue, you know, what we've done is we're trying to develop the paid subscriber offering, so that, you know, what we're doing is asking people to subscribe to support independent community media, because journalism matters. So I suppose that's our, you know, our selling point there. And we did run a summer promotion where we halved the price of the paid subscription just to see how that went. And we did find that, yeah, definitely lowering the price does help a bit, but then some people told us it was too cheap, you know, so we're back this autumn saying, you know, £40 for the year. For that, you get 4 printed copies of the magazine. We'll invite you to events. We run events on a fairly regular basis to discuss the content of the magazine. And as I said, you know, through doing the most recent Google News Initiative program, the Rapid Sprint, we've been trying to develop a multi-platform, multimedia content offering each month called Voice, which we're going to actually put out in between the quarterly editions of the magazine. So there's more value for people. So we're increasingly thinking everything is free, you know, it's open access, our website, all the back copies are on our magazine. So how do you, what is the offering there that you can develop this paid subscriber offering? What do you need to do? What's the benefit to them? And I think the print copy, even though it sort of seems very retro and vintage nearly, but you know, print actually does have a quality to it. You know, you get high quality, 180 grams, gloss finish cover, and you've got a piece of substantial product in your hand. You know, it goes into all the libraries. We've developed a good relationship with the library, so it's free, those print copies, for everyone who goes into the public libraries to read. And we really support our libraries through doing that. And then obviously if we develop another product that's more you know, video stories, podcasts, we're trying that out for the last quarter of this year to see, is this an offering that our paid subscribers would find useful? So I think it's trying to balance all the time your offering, you know, and your product, and how much money you can get to support the journalism through either sponsorship, sponsored stories, or paid subscribers, or if you're very lucky, maybe a philanthropist will come along and, you know, help you tick along for a few years, which happened to us actually 2 years ago. And we were very, very fortunate to be in that position. We wouldn't have been able to grow so much if it hadn't been for the philanthropists who put in that money, you know. So it just moved us up the scale a little bit, you know, and helped us really to, you know, core funding gives you a security that you don't have when you're just going from edition to edition of the magazine.
How do you find a philanthropist?
We were very lucky. It was a woman who was a volunteer with us who came into money, and you know, like, oh, she knew what we were doing. She came along to an edition of one that we did about justice and, you know, prisons, and you know, she had worked herself as an educator in prison, so she was really familiar with that sort of what we were trying to do to tell those stories. And yeah, I think we just were so surprised when she decided, oh, I've got some money now, I'm going to, you know, we were very, very surprised when she announced it, that she was going to give us some core funding. She's very much in the background. She didn't want to get involved at all. It was just, look, here, have this. And it just allowed us to have that security for a few years, which is lovely. So hopefully we've had that opportunity to build on it now and really start to grow as a result of it.
Great. Thanks, Una. That's really interesting and really useful.
Thank you.
So I think we'll move on next to Michael, Michael Casey. Brilliant, there he is. Michael, what's your idea that you would like to share with members?
I'm trying to remember what my idea was. I think it had something to do with crime. But I think firstly, I'd just like to say how much I've enjoyed everything so far. And as I said, when I saw the Facebook page that we have, and you have, and go to it, and how many ideas, and I call on my Twitter bio for your Harlow, I say it's one journalist in partnership with 85,000 people, because without the 85,000 people, wouldn't have any stories. And likewise, I think, you know, this whole independent news network is the sharing of ideas is fantastic, and it's great because, or rather, you know, I'm always paying homage to other people's ideas, and I guess it's just another example. I'm sure I was going to say something about crime reporting, and I can't remember which one I was going to do, but I think one of them is just, I attend events, I attend council meetings, I go to community meetings, sports events, education stuff, and also that happens to be I get a report from I go to a crime scene, and I think you just do it. And I say I'm not going there as Serpico to go and investigate and go underneath the bar, and it's just very much get a panning shot. Now, I guess what I'm, you know, there's lots of great things I wanted to bring up as ideas here, but I guess it's one of these stuff, you know, hassle stuff that happens, and if anybody else can avoid this happening, that would be great. And I think what's happened, you know, in every year the last 4 years, I've gone to loads, just turn up, do a little panning shot, and that's it, you know, and I go away again. But what was, and also, by the way, when I turn up, I've got my accreditation, you know, including the ICNN one. I think I look like a journalist, if you know what I mean. And but often I say to the police, oh, there, hi, I'm just doing a panning shot. So I don't turn up, you know, at a mystery. But what has happened once every 4 years is I've turned up and the cops have tried to stop me reporting, and quite aggressively so, in my opinion. And for 3 of the last 4 years, I've ended up have a good relationship with the chief inspector saying, listen, can you tell your guys, and I've quoted, and the thing for people is I've quoted a College of Policing. You know, College of Policing guides are very clear to all police officers of all ranks, you know, that they have no powers or any moral power to stop us doing our job, as long as it is our job that we are doing. And then very much in that respect, it's very much the chief inspectors passed it on to the squad, going, just to let you know. So very much off the record, but I have stressed, and listen, I'm just saying anybody, because I'm in Essex, by the way, I don't explain that. I said, I'd hate to think that one day one of your cops is going to end up on YouTube with one of these viral films. So it's very much a symbiotic relationship, cooperation with them. And that's the way I like to play it with them, because, you know, that's what happens, you know. And however, earlier this year, 6:30 in the morning, car on its roof, etc. And so I went along, you know, I did not plan my Saturday morning to go on a car on a roof, but there I went. And I do the same thing, I'm just about, you know, etc. And this traffic guy, you know, this traffic police officer, you know, said, please stop filming. I did the same thing. He said, I don't care. I will arrest you if you walk any further, etc., etc. So blah, blah, blah. I'm limited for time here. You know, again, I explained, I didn't go where I was because I was under threat of arrest, etc., etc. So on that occasion, I had to take it a step further. You know, and I took it to my MP, I took it to the Director of Communications, saying the same thing. Can you tell your guys? And they said, you know, that I think the cop, you know, had liaison with his inspector of traffic, etc., etc. So it's just maybe nobody else has had this, maybe nobody else is interested in this, but maybe it's my fault. You know, I thought I'd just share it with you and tell people, you know, the bottom line is, and I'll conclude, there are direct rules. You know, their responsibilities are responsibilities, and I guess I'm saying that 19 out of 20 times, maybe 49 out of 50, it's fine. You know, it's you know, the rate's good, and sometimes, you know, I'll turn up and somebody will say, the cop will go, I'll move out the way, or I'll put my hat on because the last time you filmed me, I got shouted at my inspector for not wearing my hat, etc. So I just wanted to share that. You know, there is direct rules, there is responsibilities, and stand your ground, and also maybe have a good relationship with maybe inspector or chief inspector there. It bears fruit. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michael. Really interesting. Couple of comments. John Cookpost, you know, our chief inspector is very engaging, and so far our local police have been very good too. So again, you know, it's a matter of having those kind of relationships and that you can kind of tap into. And Daniel Webb has also kind of posted a comment saying, I've been threatened with arrest on many occasions. I now wear a body-worn camera, not just for incidents involving the public attacking journalists. So that's another tip, I think, which you know, which Daniel's obviously got for the public. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Michael?
Well, very quickly, you know, it was well documented. I spoke earlier this year with the government committee on online harms. There were 3 journalists, myself, Amy Fenton from Cumbria, and Patricia Devlin from Northern Ireland, about incidents that happened to all 3 of us. Mine ended up in a court case, a man arrested, etc., etc. I'm sounding like a right troublemaker. I'm not, but it's just stuff. I know, it must be you, Casey. But, you know, stuff happens that way. But again, it's, I think sometimes it is, and, you know, there's an article in the Press Gazette, if anybody wants to see it. I discussed it in great length. But it was, you know, but it is all about the relationship. And actually, finally, on Monday, the Chief Constable of Essex and the communications team have invited the press in Essex for a meet and greet. That's the first time that's ever happened in that way. And that might be a good thing, or the skeptics might say, either is there some trouble down the road you want us all to, or they might go, you can't do right for doing wrong. We just want to have a meet and greet, but also they have used the word about their service agreement. And so I'm sort of thinking, are you got new rules of engagement? Are you, you know, because I do, you know, I don't always get, they were complaining about something I wrote yesterday, but about an opinion piece. But that's the nature of it. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think that why, you know, all the places people work, why aren't your chief constables and your comms teams having meet and greets across the country? That's another thing.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, lots of interesting comments in the chat. You know, Jeremy writes about community inspector writing a monthly column for South Leeds Life. A Skinner about you know, about police officers not knowing the law, which I think a lot of us have probably kind of encountered. And some issues that Daniel's obviously raising about Wiltshire Police, which I'm kind of aware of. So yeah, thanks for that, Michael. Good points to kind of raise there. So thanks very much. And last but certainly not least on our skill swap is Ben Black from Cumbrian Life. Ben, over to you.
Cheers, John. Yeah, it's not a shared experience I had in the last month or so concerning copyright theft. I picked up a really interesting human interest story involving someone's disability scooter was stolen. So I knew to get some decent pictures. So I went out of my way to visit the person concerned, get some nice pictures, used that on my site late that afternoon. And then the following morning, I had a missed call off a journalist at the local newspaper, a Newsquest paper. I called her back around midday. I knew it was about. It was obviously either the phone or I was asked for the pictures. Called back, there was no answer. And then later that evening, again, just good relationships. I sent a text message saying, I rung you back, but there was no answer, no reply. And then Saturday morning, I noticed that they'd done this story, but used 2 of my photos of the people. clearly set up by me. They were my pictures. So I did an early morning text message to Richard Gurn at the Caerphilly Observer, who has been extremely helpful to me over the last couple of years. We had a sort of conversation, and he said, put an invoice in the post, straight away. So he took some advice of a photographer friend of his. I just sent an invoice saying, an author's used my photos, here's an invoice, please pay it within the usual amount. It took a few days for the editor to reply, and he sort of brushed me off in a kind of, we've got a budget for that, it was an honest mistake, we'll give you 30 quid and as a goodwill gesture, but then we'll keep your photos on record for any future reuse. And the pictures are quite unusual. They're quite, but not being experienced in the copyright and the ownership and just this kind of stuff. There was a bit thrown out. So I knew they were in the wrong. I wasn't in the wrong. So I spoke to Matt Abbott, who also got David Banks involved through the ICNN, which is brilliant, who advised that, what would you take for them? What would be a reasonable cost? Because one thing the editor of the paper said, this is the next stage, sorry. Yeah, at this stage then, David Banks said, fill in a small claims form online, which was brilliant, simplest form to fill in, the evidence, the stages. It took me about 20 minutes. At the end, save it, screen grab it before you submit it, and then send that to the editor saying, if you don't pay within 7 days, I'll be pressing this button. That then alerted an email from the head of Newsquest legal department, who again brushed me off and used a term something like, you can't just pluck figures out of thin air, quoted some case law, which was a bit alarming, and said we would offer you £100. So straight away, just by mentioning small claims and a screen grab, it went straight up to £100. And I still wasn't quite happy with how it was approached, or they made me feel, so like how they approached it with me. So he quoted some case law, and the case law I haven't got in front of me, but it's around the market value of a picture in the local market. And I couldn't prove, I've sold stuff to the paper, like I've sold a video for 50 quid. I couldn't really put a price on what this thing is worth, because some case law that's been there, you can't just say a picture's worth £1,000. It's all very, and yet, as they are the local market, they obviously set the prices they might possibly pay, but even though they've said they haven't got a budget. So I just wasn't quite happy. So with advice from David, Matt and Richard, then I thought, I'm just going to check with the NUJ. And they really supported a quick phone call and said, yeah, you're in the right. They said you didn't get a picture credit or an online credit. And so I'd obviously take the £100 and stop any further stuff and leave it there. But I just thought I'd just chance a little bit extra. So I'd speak to the NUJ, they said, yeah, they thought 150 quid would be reasonable. So I wrote back, they ignored me again for 9-10 days. So again, I spoke to the NUJ, who then emailed the head of legal, and it was within like hours. They said, yeah, the editor will decide, the editor will be in touch with you. And then the following morning or late that evening, I had a lovely email from the editor of the local paper, the nicest email ever, saying, we'll pay 150 quid, and we'll make sure the pictures aren't used again. But that just flips with the kind of tone of voice that I had originally, which was the exact opposite of that. It was just the whole tone that really sort of jarred with me and made, but it was a good lesson in the kind of support that we got from, Richard Gurn, one of the members, the Independent Community News Network, with Matt getting in touch with David Banks, and just a couple of emails, checking the emails I was going to send. And then the small claims was that just jumped the price up straight away to 100 quid. But yeah, it was the tone that frustrated me, and it was why I'm glad I sort of pushed it a little bit. And yeah, it was the exact opposite of what they started with, really. So a couple of emails, a few conversations with some helpful members and colleagues, and yeah, I was pretty happy with getting that email Friday afternoon.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, we've experienced, people have experienced that quite a lot, and I know you've sold quite a few pictures here and there, haven't you, to nationals and occasionally to the locals. But it's this kind of attitude, like that they can just take something and then just brush you off with like a 30 quid, and keeping the copyright on the image or something like that as well, so that they could just use it whenever they wanted to in the future, when they wanted to do like revisit the story, for example, and then they would monetize it off your hard work. It's a disgrace, really. It's really shameful. But we're glad you got there in the end.
Yes. There's the tone of voice. I mean, we're all plain English and tone of voice, and the approach was, you can't pluck things out of thin air. Mistake is call it goodwill gesture. They wanted to enter into a contract, i.e., by keeping my copyright. So it was all just a bit messy, and but yeah, so I was really pleased last week to draw a line under it. I sent the invoice off last night.
I saw for everybody listening and watching, I saw the image and I saw the article, and the images were clearly not owned by the protagonist of the story. They were clearly staged photographs, and they were nowhere. They didn't exist anywhere else but on Ben's website. And so for them to come and say, "Oh, we didn't know that they were yours," is quite a leap from a professional news organization, and particularly one that has a history.
Another quick point. So I was told by the editor that it'd be a faff to pay me. It'd be a faff to pay me. Use those words. It would be a faff to set you up on the system, the contributor system. It was almost like, if you want to go for the faff for 30 quid, then but I obviously did. And he's now said, "Oh, he moved in a few days." So we'll see.
Unreal. Well, it's really good that you've got that sorted out. And David Banks, the media law advisor with ICNN, was able to help you and give you some advice. And it's great that you were able to get the extra advice that you had from the NUJ. So yeah. Well, I know that John has got a talk tomorrow, which I'm really excited about, which is about, I'll let John explain, but it's going to hopefully help resolve issues like this in the future.
Yeah, so 1 o'clock tomorrow is I'm going to talk about ICNN's Ping project, which is very much aimed at stopping this sort of thing kind of happening. So hyperlocals would put any kind of copy or photographs or multimedia into the Ping system, and hopefully the big boys would start to pay an amount of money to start to use the content from ICNN members. So they're doing it legally. ICNN members get money back for it, so that's the idea behind the Ping project, to stop theft, which it happens to everybody. I regularly get stories, what we euphemistically call followed up, in Leeds by the Yorkshire Evening Post, and it's really annoying, and it's immoral in many cases. So I'm hoping that Ping will go some way to track that. We had a beta trial earlier this year, and that proved quite successful, and we're just in the middle of negotiating with a major company to start off getting some payment for hyperlocals. Might not be a massive amount to begin with, but as we build it up, hopefully it's something which is going to turn into a useful revenue stream, because if they're going to steal the stuff anyway, it's you need to get money for it and recompense for it. So yeah, great, thanks for that, and lots of comments in the in the chat about this, so please do revisit that. Matt, do you want to has anybody else got any ideas or anything else that they want to kind of share before we finish this session off? If not, then I'll hand you over to Matt, who will finish off and summarise today's events, and I'm going to head off now and set up the ongoing chat. So if anybody wants to continue any conversations that we've had this afternoon, anything they want to talk about, I'll be heading over to a separate chat room, just about to post the link now. And happy to kind of be part of the chat a bit later.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. Yeah, I'll be jumping in that room as well in a few moments. But I just wanted to, first of all, just extend my incredible thanks to Professor Karen Wall-Jorgensen, Dr. Julia Boyle, Richard Gerner, Rihanna Davis, Dominic Young, Jeremy, Una, Michael, and Ben, for spending the time today and taking the time out of their busy calendars to talk to us all. I think we can all agree that it's been a fascinating day, and we've definitely learned a lot. So thank you for everybody to coming along. And we have a really exciting day ahead of us tomorrow as well. So we've got David Floyd from Social Spider. Social Spider run 4 publications in London, 5 I think actually now, on a social enterprise model. And then we've got Joshi Herman, who runs the Manchester Mill, which is a Substack model. Then we've got John Barron and Tony Lloyd, who is our tech partner on the Ping platform. Followed by a panel discussion, which I'm really excited about. It's moderated by Phyllis Stephen for Edinburgh Reporter, and it includes Phil Creighton from Wokingham Today, Claudia Kiss from Social Spider, Daryl Chamberlain from 853 London and the Charlton Champion, and Natalie Bloomer from the NN Journal. And then we have a discussion afterwards, basically an open-ended discussion on collective advertising and the way forward, more of a collective brainstorm really. So we hope you'll join us tomorrow and stick around until the end of the day.